Hello, and welcome to The Fool and the Philosopher.
Philosopher and the Fool.
Cameron.
And Connor. School prepares you for systems that were made by people that went through school. However, when you deal with a Goliath of a system, or something that's more advanced than the school you went into, then it gets a little more difficult to deal with.
So there's a YouTube channel called Daryl Talks Games.
Yeah.
Who talked about school. So there's a creativity index.
Yeah.
And so what he was talking about was the Legend of Zelda shrines in relation to school education. So what he does is I don't think he's a psychologist. I think he has a bit of a background in psychology and he enjoys reading papers.
Yeah.
And he links it to video games. So he'll say, why is this game scary? Here's the papers that go through that. Why is this game addictive? Why is this game fun? It's a very cool channel. So there's a creativity index that they give to adults. And they gave it to children. They've done this before, like multiple times, in kindergarten. And the children tend to rank in the 95th percentile on the test. So it was something like, I think it was like 95% of children are within the 95 percentile in kindergarten. Yeah. So basically almost all kindergartners have genius level creativity by this metric compared to an adult. Yeah. And by, I think it was grade, it might have been 12 years old, it might have been grade 12. They do it again. Yeah. And they do it over the corresponding years. And it drops very sharply.
So school's designed to suck the creativity out of children?
Well, not quite, but what happens is school gives you problem-solving tools, but it punishes you for using them incorrectly. So you get this in math class all the time, where kids will come up to a solution a different way, and the teacher says, no, you're doing it wrong. And so there's that idea of show the work. Yeah. The reason the teachers want you to show the work is because they don't actually care about you getting the answer. They want to see that you understand the concept they're teaching you. Yeah. But the problem is that isn't what a kid sees. They see that because that's not how schools are actually designed, because you pass or fail based on if you get the correct answer. Yeah. So the kid doesn't care if he learns the technique. He cares if he gets the correct answer, which means that when a teacher punishes you for getting the correct answer through the wrong methods, you restrict yourself to the correct methods in order to pass or fail, because that is necessary that is your goal as an educated child. Which means that you stop thinking creatively. You you become reinforced to think uncreatively. So
because I was such an idiot in my early years of school, that means I'm creative.
So in that could be.
Well, no, why I'm saying that is because
both of us did very poorly in our early years of school.
Yeah, But I didn't learn...
You did poorly for a different reason than me.
Yeah, but I didn't learn those very much. You have to do these fundamental systems. I always have taken things at a creative approach of like trying different solutions.
Also, the standard method didn't work for you.
Yeah.
Because you have the worst dyslexia I've ever seen. I don't know if it gets worse.
It can get so worse that people are basically crippled by it.
I mean, you are nearly.
Yeah, but I mean actual interaction in society, even with the programs, they can barely cope.
Okay.
It gets so bad. Dyslexia can get so bad. I think I'm in the 90th group of dyslexics. But when you get past the 90th, it can make you appear to have lower IQ because you don't have the comprehension of reading to actually be able to do an IQ test.
Right. I mean, you probably couldn't have until you were quite a bit older.
Yeah.
10 or 11 or so.
Yeah, but it's it can impact you to that level and can almost never write.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's funny because a lot of the time I will say, why do you spell so bad? And I go, I have dyslexia. And then people are like, I have dyslexia too. What they're missing is, this is what I'm typing, is so I type that thing out, then I spent about 10 minutes correcting it, and there's I have dyslexia too. They just wrote something out, had a few mistakes. Those mistakes come after I've done all my correcting.
Is, what do you call it? Speech path? Bad talking? Is that related to dyslexia?
So there's different...
lisping, stuttering?
Yes, so there is...
slurring?
5 I think there's 5 categorizations in the term we use for dyslexia or learning disability. And so there's dyslexia, which is most commonly associated with reading comprehension and ability to write, so spelling. And so this comes into play with mixing up words, putting things together. Then there is dysgraphia,
Yeah.
which comes into play of fine motor control within rigid systems.
Yeah.
So
Sounds familiar.
okay, when I took a test, this was a nightmare test. This was part of my psychological gains something for school. So I was given shapes, right? And they're like 2 lines. So it was like a shape that had a hollow in it. And what I had to do for this test was draw
Yeah.
as straight as I could to create the shape in between these lines. So on that, I was in the, I think, it's weird when you put this, the 10th or something percentile.
Yeah.
I am so, I'm very, very bad at that. Like, I am at a grade, I think, 3 level.
Is dyscalculia related or totally the opposite?
Dyscalculia is related.
Okay.
Partly. So, this is a problem to calculate. So, where this comes into play is not being able to understand numbers and systems of numbers.
Like you can't add or...
Yeah, so you can't add or divide because people tell you how to add and divide, and they do it wrong. Because most ways that teaching add and divide is wrong. Like even alright, so I've got like 3 little dots, and I've got 3 little dots. I put them together, what do I got? So...
You've got 2 sets of 3 little dots.
Yes, most people go 6, but people with dyscalculia go, you've got 2 sets of 3 little dots. And that's actually very, very useful when it comes to mathematics, is looking at 2 sets of 3 little dots. That's incredibly useful.
If you can overcome that hurdle.
Yeah, so there's that. So that's dyscalculia. I actually had problems with calculations that I really had to learn. And so that's another one, is the calculations. Then speech impediments is basically, so people who, in dyslexia thing, I can't remember what it's called, but so a lisp is because words are in rigid systems, because you need that to communicate. But another thing with dyslexia as a disability is it's anathema to a rigid system, which is dyslexic people are more comfortable actually making random noises and singing and trilling. Consistency is one of the problems.
Right.
Like just having consistency and going fast. So you can't use the word systems, and so you're trying to use them, you can't. So that affects it. And then it can be related to spatial organization. So there's a study that was done on the whole thing, which is, so I believe you don't imagine stuff, right? Like images?
Not really, no.
Yeah, so there's that level.
Yeah.
There's people who don't imagine at all. There's actually a disability where you can't comprehend fundamental shapes even while looking at them.
Yeah, so it's weird because I can rotate 3-dimensional objects just fine.
Yeah.
I just don't see them.
Yeah.
I know it's on the other side without
So
creating a picture.
Then there's people who can create objects in their minds, so they can create image.
Yeah.
There's people who can rotate 3D shapes. And then most dyslexic people, apparently, can rotate 3D environments.
Right.
Interact with them. And like I don't really see the object like I can comprehend them if I focus on them. It's not really like you see them like you see them.
Yeah.
But you know they're there. Like you get the idea of them.
Well, that's how same with imagery for me. Like I can picture a friend's face, let's say.
Yeah.
But I'm not looking at it. And I don't know if anyone is or not. But
yeah.
It's kind of hard to communicate on that level.
Yeah, and so there's like that whole level of things. And then
like I can remember back when our dad had a beard. But it really depends on the moment too, like how clear. But when I dream, it's like totally real. So I'm not really sure what to call it.
And then there falls into the learning categories of so what part of this inconsistency in learning things. So for me to spell because, I have to use word association of baby eats candy apples until she explodes. And most people, those are actually useless.
Baby eats candy apples uselessly?
No, to most people, those are useless.
Right. How did it go, though? All right.
Baby eats candy apples until she explodes. That spells because.
Right. Huh.
And so...
I have trouble with Cardinal Directions.
Yeah. I do too. So Cardinal Directions is
Northeast, southwest.
never eat soggy wieners.
Yeah. I can actually go northeast, southwest, but I have to do that every time. I never think east is right or something.
So the thing with dyslexic people definitely is this is a tool that's being found to be very effective for them is association.
Yeah.
Basically, the more connections you can build, the better.
Right.
But other people, that takes up space.
So
And it slows down the process.
yeah, because I was going to ask, why have that extra step? If you can memorize never eat soggy wieners, why not just memorize northeast, southwest? But it's because of you want northeast, southwest, never eat soggy wieners, never eat shredded wheat. You want as many associations as possible.
Yeah. And so you need more contact points. So I had problems with would, should, could. I can actually spell them quite fine now because once you build association enough times, it actually works. Like, you know those horrible things in grade 1 where it's like you have to write out a word 100 times?
I don't think so.
Okay, we had that.
Okay. That does sound horrible.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's like you would write the letter A over and over.
Oh, I remember doing that, like letters.
And then you would like heart it or whatever.
Don't remember that part.
Okay,
But...
yeah, it's like which ones are you most happy with?
Ah, yes. I remember like doing numbers and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so...
I was terrible at it.
So the word magic, I can spell magic really, really well. I used to be terrible at it, but there's a video game which magic was a cheat code in.
Ah.
And so I typed it over and over again. And so that association was with a cheat game, and then I learned to spell it there.
M-A-J-E-K. Magic.
M-A-G-C. I see. Damn it, you. See, that's what happened. You can break the association too. But so would, could, should would be would octopus use line des? Could octopus use line des? Should octopus use line des?
What's line desk?
Well, it's like lime or line. It's a desk made of lime.
Like lime wood or the fruit?
Like lime the rock.
Why is an octopus using a desk?
Well, would it? Should it? Could it?
Would octopus use... Oh, you're spelling the...
Would, yeah. Would, should, could.
Except for should, there's an H.
But the should... see, S and H is a letter.
Oh, I guess, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is Ost.
I thought that it was just this random octopus with a desk for no reason whatsoever. I didn't realize it was spelling something. But then, that doesn't make any sense, right? Because you can't spell should, but you can spell should, octopus, use, lime, and desk.
That's because all those words I've used in these cases are using the sound of the first letter.
Ah.
Because if we go into the word would,
yeah,
W,
yeah.
O,
yeah,
U. So that if we go by those, then would sound like would.
Would, yeah.
It'd be like would.
I think.
And if we take ghost, it'd be like ghost.
That's it. You know the thing about that is, so ziggurat. I don't know if you know this. Ziggurat is like an Aztec temple type structure. Not Mesopotamian, I think is actually where it's from. But anyways, it used to be spelled ziggurat. So another one is Peking, the that city in like 1800s novels and stuff. That's Beijing. It's the same word spelled slightly differently because the letters don't quite encapsulate the sound.
Yeah.
So I would argue that wood is actually pronounced wood. And I put a very soft L in there. So soft, I probably can't even pronounce it properly. But it's like you aim for it.
Yeah, well, so that's my problem with certain words that I'm trying to learn to spell them. So neighbor.
Yeah.
I spell it nabber.
A neighbor sucks as well because the spell check won't help you because you're Canadian.
Yes. But so I spell neighbor nabber.
Yeah.
Is it future? Is a nightmarish word.
Well, neighbor's easy, actually. It's I before E, except after C, or as in way, as in neighbor and way, and weekends and holidays in the month of May. And you'll always be wrong.
But, so future I have a problem with.
Oh.
And I'm trying to slowly learn some of these words I have a problem with, and part of the learning process is actually looking at them. I can't remember any off the top of my head, so I haven't learned them enough, obviously, but actually breaking them into the sounds without the skips. So if I was to speak them that way, I'd sound like a moron.
Like, telephone.
Yeah, but basically doing that, like actually, because there's all these weird things in them.
Yeah, no, and I think that's, makes sense.
And in English, I mean, so there's even that level, but in English there is 172 words, there's 72 words that are commonly used.
It's funny you said lerds while we're talking about...
Yeah, so there's 72 words that are commonly used that you cannot pronounced using the English rules in any sense.
Is there?
Yes.
I'd be surprised, but...
Well, sorry. The rules you are taught.
Right, okay.
The rules... So, these are exception words that have their own rules.
My argument is that the rules for English are, use the pronunciation of whatever language you stole the word from.
Through, thought, being... So, through, though, thought, being, are all in that.
Sean. I mean, that's a name.
Ghost, host, most.
Right.
So those are the ost words. So ost is actually a letter. I can't remember all of them. I actually used to know all of them off my head.
Well, ghost, host, and most are messed up, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And toast. Throw that in there and suddenly it's like, what? Like toast follows the rules, I assume.
Yeah, but being is weird because it's B-E-E-N.
Oh, that bean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but don't you just ignore the second vowel with English anyways? So it'd just be bean, like B-E-N, bean.
Yeah, but
bean.
It's
the E should be on the other side of the N, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it does work. EE does work, but it's just very weird.
Most and host. That is a weird one. This should be most and host.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing is actually learned from our principal, which was a fun one. I didn't learn this from like the proper teacher. Learned this rule about so when you use O-R, E-R, or A-R, and the sounds they make.
Yeah.
So core, so C-O-R,
is
going to be a C and then an O-R sound. Where if it's beaker, it was a B, like I'm making up a word right now.
Yeah.
But if you had a B-E, C-O-R, it won't be beaker, it'd be beaker. Because O-R and A-R, if they're at the end of a word with more than one syllable, they are pronounced with a er.
Okay. Connor.
Is pronounced Connor.
Yeah. But it should be pronounced Connor, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, Connor. I think I say Connor.
Some people say Connor.
Yeah. Connor. Whenever I think about names, I realize I don't think about them when I say them. They become more of an associational action to grab someone's attention than a purposeful action of any sort.
So K is the most... K and S... S has its use, but K is a very weird letter. So why we have K and C and S, like one of those should actually be gone.
We have French and German roots, though.
Yeah, but one of those should be gone because a C in front of an E makes a S sound.
Yeah.
A C in front of an I also makes a S sound. So you put a K there if you need in that case.
Well, except if you say something like Julius Caesar, or the Macedonians, or Eurydice. So Greek uses C in front of E is still a hard C.
Yes.
But we don't actually talk that way most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then people go after you for calling them Celtic or Macedonians.
Yeah.
Although I think most people say Macedonian, actually.
Yeah, and some people do say Celtic.
Yeah.
But it's Celtic.
Yeah. I prefer Celtic because that's how it's spelled, but yeah, it is Celtic.
Yeah.
And that's because it's, well, Greek? That's not Greek, but I guess it's a Greek descriptor.
And so we should
maybe
basically change the word so that city should be spelled with an S.
I don't think so. So my thought is that...
I'm not saying we should change, I'm just saying it should be.
Well, no, because English isn't a language. It's an amalgam of many, many languages.
No, actually...
I think it's probably the most powerful language on earth. Just for the sheer... There is no word you can't add to English.
Yeah, well, that's... Like, I've pointed this out before. I don't know if I've pointed it out here. But I've noticed this thing, which is, so... If you try to speak French to a French Canadian, I don't know about people in France, but if you try to speak French to a French Canadian, they're not going to understand you.
Yeah.
And you can be pronouncing it pretty good, but they won't understand you. If you try to speak German to a German person, they're going to have a lot of trouble. They're like, what are you saying? Like, what are these words? And depending on which region in Germany you're in, also can have like huge difference. If you try to speak Japanese to a Japanese person, depending on which region they are from, it's going to be very difficult because they have like weird regional word accents.
Yeah.
But if a Japanese person speaks English, you can go, yeah, okay, I can understand. If a German person speaks English, you're like, all right, you're not that good at it, but I know what you're saying. And if a French person, like, yeah, okay, I can understand you got the French accent, but I got it.
Yeah, I think French people are slightly better.
Yeah.
And Spanish people are one of the best.
Yeah.
They can understand fairly bad Spanish.
But I feel like English is really good at that. Like, besides the native English speakers, like if they're speaking Welsh at you or...
It's funny, I was showing, I was saying to Mum how if you try to say a German word and you get it slightly wrong, they say, well, I have no idea what you're saying. Mm. But then we're expected to listen to people like Slavoj Žižek, I think is his name, that socialist philosopher, who just sprays when he talks, and he also has this heavy... My mom thinks it's a Hebrew accent. Yeah. And so he sounds... He sounds like a balloon being squeezed. and an English speaker, you're supposed to go, yes. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and so...
It's also a shame because he's apparently one of the best defenders of socialism alive. Yeah. But you can't give him a fair shake unless you really pay attention.
Yeah. But what's also on top of that, language-wise, is then English people are accused of being lazy and only knowing one language.
Yeah.
And there's a paradox within that, which is not only is it very easy for us to understand you if you're speaking English, but also you speak your native language and then you learn English.
Yeah.
And that can basically get you good anywhere in the world. Whereas if we learn language, then that's English speakers learn language, that's one spot where it's good.
The other thing is, first of all, English speakers are learning every language. Yeah. Like we have otaku, skookum, aquarium, and okay, that's
spaghetti.
Spaghetti, yeah.
Chow.
So we've got, chow's at Spanish, I guess. We've got skookum, which is First Nation. Mm-hmm. We've got like otaku, which is Japanese. Mm-hmm. We've got the entire opposite corners of the world. Mm-hmm. Now there is languages like Hindi, which are similar because they use a lot of English words.
Yeah.
And
Korean.
Tagalog. And, I think
Koreans like using English words.
Yeah, and so do Japanese people.
I think Korean way more than Japanese.
And Norwegians.
Yeah. Wasn't the Norwegian language actually quite small?
The Old Norse is. It's 3,000 words. Ah. And so that leads to some weird cases like Ivar the Boneless. They had the same word for bone and leg, so we don't know which one it was exactly.
Yeah, well, it was their word Ulf, so wolf.
Yeah.
Has 5 different meanings or something.
It'd be a very quick language to learn. I don't know how easy it is.
And actually, was it something very one of the names for Odin? Odin had a lot of names, but when you go to Old Norse, you say, I think it's old man or something in Norse. You're actually saying Odin,
right?
But old man also means all father, one eye, he who wields spears. Okay, when you say Odin, you're saying 5 of his names in one.
So with dyscalculia, the part maybe this is just a initial hang up. So you say 3 plus 3 equals 2 groups of 3.
Yeah.
Can't you just tell the kid? Okay, but whenever you hear 2 times 3, just say 6. Even if that doesn't make sense, just say 6. Or is it that does that start to erode the foundation to the point where they don't know why they're doing things, and then it's
there's no reason for that.
Right, so they can follow the rules, but then you try to take them slightly off the path and they're just totally lost because they had no idea what they were doing in the first place.
And so...
they memorized up to their 20 times table, but you ask them what's 21 times 2, and they're just
Yeah.
Because they never learned the foundation of...
Yeah, so basically, when I was doing that, the math CD of learning up to the 10 times table and going all the way to 11 and 12.
Yeah.
So I was basically reinforcing that in my brain over and over and over again. And some people can just go, okay, I've memorized it.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, so part of the process of doing that, I had dances associated within my head, a lot of very insane stuff. And I eventually learned, but part of it was actually just, while I'm doing that whole thing, also associating logic with it and the reasoning. So, I remember I've always had a bit of a problem with division, and I had a math class.
Where did the other numbers go?
Well, so I was in math class, and this was a grade 12 math.
Yeah.
And we were doing a test. And so I'm writing the test, And there's this really complicated part of the test. I was like, all right, I know how to do this like question. And then going along, how do I divide? And so I went to the teacher and asked for help with the question. She's like, I can't help you with this question. I was like, no, I'm not asking you to help me with the question. How does dividing work? I don't care about anything else. How does dividing work? How does this math fundamental work? And then she like sort of looked at me and was like, how are you in my class and like my highest marked student? And now you're asking me how does dividing work? It's because I just forgot at that point because I'd been doing division basically on faith. And so during that test, I did a bunch of multiplication and I started using multiplication to divide. And then I learned what dividing was during the process of that test.
Yeah, division.
But to that point, I've been doing division by faith.
Yeah, division's a weird one because it's kind of abstract. It's asking you how many groups result from grouping something into a number of objects. So if you have 20 objects and you put them in groups of 5, how many groups do you create?
Yeah.
And so the number 4 doesn't exist anywhere.
Yeah.
It's not like you've reduced. So division sounds like reduction, but it's not. It's grouping.
Yeah, well, so multiplication is very easy because you take this, you take one object, you take another object, and bosh, you put them together, it gets bigger.
Yeah.
But the order matters in dividing.
Yes.
And that's weird.
Yeah.
It's really weird. It's really hard to wrap your head around. And it's actually easier in dividing. Like, part of dividing that I make easier is playing one object or other. I like that far better than when there's like the little stupid divide symbol.
Yeah.
I hate that thing when I see it. I like it when it's like the line and they're like over top of each other or something, because that's understandable.
Well, you can do that yourself.
I know. That's actually partly how I do division, but...
Yeah. So his video, Daryl Talks Games,
yes,
he showed that each shrine had... Now, there is very creative solutions to shrines. And there's also... you can do wind bombing, which isn't creative necessarily, but it's a solution that wasn't intended. But you can do stuff like... I don't know if you know, but the spicy peppers in the game...
Yeah.
If you hit them with a fire source, they produce a gust of wind. So you can actually fly with them. So you can skip most of the shrines if you have enough spicy peppers and fire arrows. Or you can put 4 fires next to each other, and that will create a draft as well.
Yeah.
Like with pieces of wood. So that's a way to skip a bunch of things. You can do a Fosbury flop where you bounce off your shield and then you store a jump, I believe, and then you do it and you get like double the height from your bounce. You can do a shield flip, which is a base game mechanic, but it doubles your jump distance, so you can actually skip some obstacles if you do it right. You can also do some stuff like you can build a catapult with the materials lying around. You can use swords to connect electrical links.
There's one puzzle I wonder how many people actually do properly, which is it's that guide through the maze puzzle where you...
Yeah, so that's a classic example. You flip it over and then you can stick the ball in, or you can launch it like a catapult.
Yeah, I launched it like a catapult.
Yeah, so those puzzles, there is variety within them, but there is typically a clear solution.
Yeah.
That you might not figure out immediately, but you can work your way through and come up with.
Yeah.
And he said this is what people going through a school system are quite good at. There's multiple answers to a solution, but what they do is they put out their feelers, basically, find what the person wanted them to find, and then work their way down that and solve it. And so, and that's why I really don't like puzzle games, because it's much easier for me, and I think probably most people, to figure out what the designers wanted from me than to solve the puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's fairly boring, because then I'm not doing anything except... there's an interaction with the designer itself, I guess. So maybe you like that dialogue.
Yeah.
Of trying to get into the designer's head a little. But I generally find that's not very enjoyable.
We can take this to D&D, and an enjoyable puzzle in D&D versus a not enjoyable puzzle. So, a not enjoyable puzzle in D&D, and this is what people make fun of DMs doing puzzles. And so a DM creates a puzzle, and they feel very clever about this puzzle, and they have the solution. Like, I'm very smart. And because they put that work into it, they want the puzzle to be solved in the way they made it.
Yes.
And so... then the dwarf with the pickaxe goes, I'm going to mine through the stone wall. And the DM goes, nope, the wall is made of indestructible stone.
They don't allow any solution but the one they came up with. Yeah,
so they have to add the solution that the wall is made of stone. And then...
I cast stone to flesh and then we burn it. It's magic proof.
Yeah.
And
so rule after rule gets added.
Then we're going to take this entire wall with us. A magic proof indestructible wall. I'm like, oh boy, yeah.
No, it's stuck in space. You're basically stuck.
It's a giant immovable rod.
You are stuck in a physicist's bubble,
Yeah.
which is how you do basic physics in. Everything's in a vacuum.
Yeah, so
and you have to solve the puzzle the way it's solved. Whereas a fun puzzle with DM is DM's like, oh, you have to solve this puzzle.
it's like I mine through it, and it's like, okay,
Yeah, that works.
yeah. It's like, okay, but you have to be careful because when your pickaxe first hits, you notice the door shifts a little, and you're so okay. So we cast levitate on the door so it doesn't depress the trigger. It's like, okay, and then you're through. You can add a little bit extra based on the logic of your puzzle, but if they break your mechanism, then that's good, and that's why Breath of the Wild's brilliant because it lets you break the mechanism.
And in the case of the DM that lets you do something, so not only is it players aren't wasting a ton of time on puzzle that they won't figure out or has a very specific solution. They get to feel clever because they figure out a solution, but they also get to feel clever because they beat the DM.
Yeah.
They got through his puzzle without doing his puzzle.
I had this awful
so-
DM one time. He really wanted me to like fight a vampire or something. He's trying to point me towards the mansion of the vampire, so I just burnt the mansion down. And he's like, "No, it's made of damp stuff."
To be fair, it was a damp stone mansion. It's very hard to light a house on fire that's damp and stony. Although it is actually quite easy to cause mass amounts of arson. And I think I should have let you do the arson.
And then had the vampire burst out on fire.
Yeah. But also, all the loot that was a potential get in the manor is destroyed.
And also all the food of the townspeople.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
What I should have done is let you do that, but there was consequences.
Yeah.
If I was an evil DM, there's children in the basement.
Yeah.
And they died because you're supposed to rescue them.
Well, I think if you had predetermined it to a degree, then fair enough. What you did was, it was kind of the opposite of what you said you should have done. But on the other hand, you did justify it to a degree.
Yeah.
Where you said you can't burn it down, but also all their food's in there, so they would starve.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's better.
Oh yeah, I did have that. All the townspeople.
Yeah. But I think it is better to give the player the option to mess up than to protect them.
Agency.
Yeah, instead of protecting them from their mistakes and ruining them. Because also my character, he was hired to kill a vampire. He wasn't hired to get... Actually, I think he might have been hired to find their food.
Yeah. I mean, that agency does have a double-edged sword, which is in another group. I filled a room full of traps. So this room was a nightmare filled with traps. And so one of the traps I established was basically a massive hashtag, like a net, made of metal wires. And so basically I had the setup in the place, and there's like pits in the floor, and they decided to be very creative, which is, I established that basically if you get to the other side of the room, like at least one party member, they can pull a lever and disable all the traps. So like, we just have to get a party member to the other end. So their very creative solution was they had their monk, who's faster than normal, run at their barbarian. And so he ran at the barbarian, then the barbarian, he basically boosted off his back. So he jumped on his back and the barbarian flung him. And he went flying straight into the giant wall of wire meshes. And so his character got like cubified. And so it's like, oh, that was really creative. Sorry.
Yeah, well, actually, that happened to me. And when I was DMing for you that one time. And I think I might have done this wrong looking back. I'm not entirely sure what I've done differently. But I had a wall which you could push over.
Yeah.
But what happened, if you found it.
Yeah.
But what happened was you turned your body intangible, but you had a chain on you that wasn't intangible and wasn't removed from your body.
Yeah.
And then you walked through the wall.
And pulled the wall over.
And so I said you pulled the wall into yourself. And you didn't like that. And looking back, I'm not sure what I don't think I quite handled it right, but I'm not sure what I should have done there. But there is definitely the problem with giving your players agency is sometimes you make them angry at you.
I mean,
but then they learn with their next character to be more cautious, hopefully, or they just hate you forever and they never play with you again. But yeah, if you set expectations and you're all willing to go into it, I think there.
And so I actually, so the case of you want people to show you your work.
Yeah.
In school. So I had a physics teacher who he expressed that the mark is worth, the gain answer right is worth 1 mark.
Yeah.
Showing me your work is worth 1 mark. And then he had this thing where he wanted us to put all the important formulas on the left side in neat order.
Yeah.
And that was worth 1 mark. So, but part of his showing the work, this guy must have spent ages actually marking, because he'd very much consider showing your work on these physics problems. But you could actually get the physics entirely wrong, like even mechanical systems. But he's like, well, this is how it's explained to you. And so he didn't want you to show it the way he wanted to see it. He just wanted to see how you thought. Like, that was how he taught.
Well, ideally, that's what show your work means.
Yeah, and that's how he taught. He very much expressed that. Like, he got angry at my grade 11 class. He was like, you're just parroting the answers. Like, you're saying it back to me.
But that's what you were taught for the entire...
Yeah, but he's like, I want to see how you guys think.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair of the teachers to blame the students for it, because they caused the problem in the first place. But it is a problem.
Yeah, but he was... Besides some of his, like, issues on that level, he was a very good teacher, because he was, like, very interested in how people thought, and then if they messed up in the showing them how, like, the thinking of it, he's like, that was a very interesting approach. So your numbers are a little off here, and gravity goes down.
So in Daryl Does Games, he talks about the one shrine that is very weird.
Yeah.
It's the... I don't know if you've done this one. It's the one with the waterfall and the sliding blocks you can lift up and down with magnesis.
I don't think of that.
The really weird thing about it is there's no solution to it.
Mm.
There is a whole bunch of ways you can solve it.
Yeah.
But none of them are, like, perfect. Like, nothing lines up quite right. So it's obvious that there's no solution. And I don't know what the designer was thinking exactly. Like,
Might be one of the best designed puzzles.
I'm going to chuck a bunch of stuff in a room and see what and then I'm going to see if I can beat it. And if I can beat it, it's staying in.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the best designed puzzles.
Because
there is no clear solution.
So what you can do is you can freeze a thing, hit it a bunch, and then once it rockets up, you're ready with cryonesis, and then you freeze it so it stops it from coming down. Or you could toss it up with magnesis and then freeze it. Or you could create the wind draft, of course. Or you could... you might be able to swim up the waterfall even. I'm not sure if you had the right suit. Or you could, like, what I ended up doing, because I was at I think I put a bomb underneath the platform. I got myself onto the platform. I launched the platform up with the bomb, and then I hang glided to the end.
Well, the one puzzle...
So that it's a very weird shrine, but it forces creative thought.
Yeah, well, so there's this one puzzle I quite distinctly remember, which is it's a fire jet shooting out of the wall, and basically it's a timing thing. So you have to walk through when the fire's not going, and there's water in the floor so you can jump down, and there's like a bit of gliding you can do. But I remember doing that puzzle is basically gliding straight through the center of it and like skipping the whole timing thing.
And a lot of those fire jet type things, they let you freeze them in time, and then you can just walk past. Like, it's the amount of freedom that game gives you is amazing, and it's
freedom with order though. It says these are the rules.
Yeah.
Now here's what you can do with them.
Yes, it gives, but they're very consistent rules.
Yeah.
It's not like...
Well, so example, No Man's Sky's initial release is a game with ultimate freedom, like random generation. Everything's kind of drab and the same. It's actually nothing to do.
So there's two aspects to that. So if you take a game like The Witcher, there is some trees you can interact with. Like you can find stuff inside them, and they're very uncommon. They're hollow stumps typically. And there's also events where you have to gather a special root or herb.
Yeah.
But it has to be a quest to do that typically. Like there's the normal stuff you can find, but if you want like dragon root, there's only one quest for that as far as I'm aware. And so it's inconsistent. Like there might be a quest where you can chop down a tree. Yeah. But that would be the only tree you can chop down. Yeah. Whereas in Breath of the Wild, if you can cut down one tree, you can cut down any tree, anywhere, anytime.
Well, as I understand the making with Breath of the Wild, so in the game like The Witcher, it's like we need a tree cut down, so this tree can be cut down. And making of Breath of the Wild, they made the system, and then they said, okay, so what can we do with this now?
They called it the chemistry engine, actually. They designed a series of interlocking systems. But they are, even though they designed that engine, they're consistent even within that, because to make the nozzles be able to freeze in time, that is something that makes sense, but that's not something they have to implement.
Yeah. But the whole design behind, like, design philosophy is what can we do with this now? And so every single time they create something, they look at it as like, can this apply to it? Can this apply to it? Can this apply to it? Can this apply to it?
So the only time the game really disappoints, and this might be hardware limitations, are large trees.
Yeah.
You can't cut those down. You can't use any size explosion to cut them down.
Yeah.
And in Gerudo Valley, you can blow up entire moblin encampments.
Yeah.
Like, you can destroy the entire structure.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly certain you can't do that anywhere else. But I'm not 100% certain. Because you might need the cannon specifically. So I don't know what would happen if you spawn the cannon in like Pharaoh and Forest and shots. I don't know what would happen. But it'd be weird that they all have the mechanics to break but never do.
I mean, also, that could be a case...
It was built for the Wii U, so...
Yeah, but that also could be a case of Gerudo Valley was built later on. And so, like, oh, we didn't make everything destructive. We're going to make these things destructive. And the game works fine without everything else being destructive, but we want this as a feature now.
Yeah, but you think they would use the same camp for every place around the world? Like, you think the rules would be... like, if you put down a camp here and a camp here, and you change the variable of one, it should change the variable of the other.
Yeah.
So it is a little odd. But it might have... I think it probably is hardware limitations.
Yeah.
They probably have a very specific zone loaded and optimized just for that action. And that's what kind of makes me excited for the second game, because porting a game typically costs you because it wasn't built for the specific system, so you can't optimize it properly.
Yeah.
And secondly, it was built for the Wii U, not the Switch. So even if you ported it perfectly, it would still be built for a lesser software.
Yeah.
So Breath of the Wild 2 being built for the Switch specifically is very exciting, because they'll be able to take better advantage of that hardware. Plus, there has been some amazing software advancements in the intervening years that they can...
Well, I think there's a game recently released, or they're talking about the demo of it, and it's one of the first games that's smaller than, like it's got content, but smaller than these big games. It's like, this downloads only 56 gigabytes.
Oh.
And so they utilize, like, the map generation stuff. They actually use that, and so it's like, what?
It's like, what's that game called? Gunkrieger? It's like 56 kilobytes for a full campaigned FPS.
Well, there's this
that
one...
destroys your CPU.
I think is it Battlefield? There's some joke about this one game that's a terabyte or something? Or like, it's absurdly
yeah,
huge.
Call of Duty.
Yeah.
Call of Duty was massive. I think it was like 500 gigabytes or something.
Yeah, but it's like absurdly huge.
Yeah. Yeah, but Gunkrieger's like 50 kilobytes.
Yeah.
But it's it procedurally generates the code to procedurally generate everything. And so the game
is running in your RAM.
Yeah. It, like, the memory's in your RAM.
Yes.
Like, it is not a game you can run easily, because it's generating the entire game for... Like, it's not... It's like...
It's a proof of concept.
An old laptop can run the game.
Yeah. But
for the graphics you're getting, the amount of power it takes is ridiculous.
Yes. And it's a proof of concept.
It's a demo.
Yeah.
It's just to show what programming can do.
Yeah.
They didn't ever want to make a full game. It's just like, how good could a programmer be if they just dedicated to the craft instead of working on get it out.
Yeah.
And but the other thing is memory is not an issue. Like, storage is not an issue for computers, but memory is. Like, memory's expensive, storage isn't. So it's kind of the opposite of what we need anyways. Like, if there was a game that ran off your storage, and that's kind of how SSD works in a way, because you load it onto the SSD and then it's all ready to go.
There's a problem with games, which is I was very disappointed in the release of Total War 3. Because looking at the reviews, it's a lot of people don't like it on release.
Well, why? Well, I mean, I know there's reasons I don't like what they did. Like, I don't like how they changed the UI.
Optimization. It doesn't run for a lot of people. It has a bunch of problems. It's like more buggy release than number 2.
Right.
And number 2 had buggy release, and people, like, in the comments, people are saying, well, I guess this is what's expected of games, like, to be released now. And thinking about games before, like, so games like Baldur's Gate and stuff, like, they had a few game-breaking bugs. And, like, years down the line, a few games, like, got a few patches to fix those things, but for the most part, the games worked. And then there's this Reddit called programmer memes.
Yep.
And you look at it, so these are like programmers who are like basically talking about their trials and tribulations. And a lot of the time, they have very, very dirty code, and they make jokes about that. And like one of the jokes is like, you're able to write code, and it's not dirty, and it's like this and this, and it's like, that's amazing. And I remember when I made a video game for a class, and my code was really dirty, and I was quite upset with that. And I made the exact same game later on, and I fixed the problems. I put a lot of work into it, and I made the code clean. And again, later on, when I was making a website for another class, I was working on it, and I kept finding redundancies or dirty parts of code. And at one point, I duplicated a bunch of pages, and I realized the initial page had a massive flaw in it. And so I deleted all my work on the other pages, then fixed the flaw, and then reduplicated it. And so I was trying to make things like as tight and nice as possible, but in a case of a different programmer, like you load a website, and it might have the same problems as mine, which is if you navigate to a certain point, you actually can't navigate back besides reloading. And I was like, just these hideous programming code.
So when you look at the history of early video games, it's amazing what the programmers do. You learn about all these really, really cool techniques they had to do to make it work. Yeah. So for example, Legend of Zelda was the biggest game ever for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yeah. It was so big they had to introduce a save game system, which was, I think, the first, or one of the very first save game systems Nintendo ever had for any of their games. Because most games were arcadey. You sit down, you play, you're done. And it's funny, actually, because Joe and Mac, you can't save in. Yeah. And I thought, well, that's dumb. Why don't they just add a saving? But there was technical limitations at the time. Yeah. Not so much for the SNES, but the developers were coming from that time where saving was difficult. And to this day, there is... I actually have no idea how Minecraft saves game.
Well, a save game era in a game like Minecraft called Valheim. So that's a game where you build stuff, and building is actually more difficult than Minecraft. And I was playing it, and I had a really, really nice house. So apparently there's a bug in Valheim I didn't know about, which is the game will reload at older instance. And so this house I put like 5 hours into was deleted. I haven't played Valheim since then.
But the fact that Minecraft saves games so easily is actually mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So what I realized with this was the developer for Streets of Rogue, you know that game that we both quite like?
Yeah.
You can only save game when you leave a level.
Yeah.
And he's making an open world game now. And so in one of his blog updates, he talked about that, and he said, that wasn't because I thought that's only when you need to save. It's because I didn't know how to allow you to save mid-level. Yeah. So for this open world game, he's had to learn so much more coding because it's a procedurally generated world with destructible environment and states. So if you don't want the save file to be this massive thing of every single block in the game at all times, you have to be really, really clever about it. So Blade Runner, for example, the video game, was it was a point and click adventure game, and you had models made from 3D models going through the world, and you interact with them and whatnot. But the technology at the time couldn't handle 3D models on the screen. Yeah. So the developers created a program that I'm trying to remember the technical aspect here. It sliced all the 3D models into tons of thin little strips, and then deleted half the strips to like save that much space. Yeah. And so they're all kind of, it's like stacked like a messed up, like sliding apart stack of pancakes or something, but it still looks kind of like a figure. And then they took a 2D image of that, and then the engine is able to load that thing, like barely. And you look at
Heroes of Might and Magic 3.
I don't know the stories behind that so much.
I looked into it.
But I want to continue with mine. So with Legend of Zelda, they used up like all the space available to them. Yeah. So they if you gain one of the rings, which increases your defense, it changes the color of Link. So Link goes from being green to being blue, and then he goes to red, I think. There might be a brown one in there as well. But if Link goes from green to red, everything with that same color code in the game, the UI, the monsters, the weapons that have the same color code as his tunic, also turn red, because they didn't have any space to spare. So it's like you are variable X. If X changes, you change. There's also issues where they had to store the icons or the colors in the same area as a lot of the code. So if you have, this is only an issue for modders, I think, but it's something like if you have too many sounds or too many colors on screen, elements start disappearing from the UI because they're pushed out of the the very small available loading area for the game. And that's why Super Mario World, you can hack the game by just throwing shells in the right pattern, because the core system of the game is the same one keeping track of the variables of everything. So the variables that are stored for shell position are the same ones telling you the physics of the game, how the game works. And there's actually an interesting case in Super Smash Bros. Melee, where the Luigi is much more powerful if he has the right color of... So these are the variables. Luigi has two states for his whirlwind. One is much more powerful than the other. But to be the more powerful type of Luigi, it depends upon what color Luigi you are, what opponent you're facing, what color your opponent is, which number each of the players are, so are you plugged into slot 1, 2, 3, or 4, and what stage you're on. It's a combination of all those things that determines if you're powerful or not. And that is because they didn't define the variable for Luigi's whirlwind state, which means what is actually happening is it's so compact that some other variable just gets accidentally stuck in the slot, and then it reads that, and it says, oh, this must be Luigi in strong state or weak state. And so there's a joke that they never nerfed Luigi for Ultimate. It's just nobody's found the combination yet to give him his strong form.
So it's funny because there is these like problems in these games, like very small problems, but that's a product of them basically trying to do everything they can. But modern programming feels like...
Yeah, no, I'm saying this is an achievement. Yeah, I'm saying this is amazing, the stuff that old developers had to go through. And nowadays, they just chuck stuff at Unity until it kind of starts moving.
Yeah.
You look at Pokemon. They couldn't fit the game onto the cartridge. Yeah. They couldn't make it work on a Game Boy. Yeah. And then, what's his name? Satoru.
Oh, Satoru, yeah.
Satoru, I think, Iwata. The head of Nintendo. Yeah. He rewrote the game, and he rewrote it so efficiently they had half the space left over on the cartridge, so they doubled the size of the game. That actually happened with the original Legend of Zelda. This is a massive spoiler for it. Do you want to hear it even?
Yep, I'm not going to play it.
Okay. If you beat the game, it starts a new game from scratch. In a different world.
Huh.
So, Legend of Zelda, you beat Ganon. Yeah. And there's a New Game Plus, but the New Game Plus is on a different map.
Huh.
With new enemies and a new layout. So, Legend of Zelda series is famous for its New Game Plus.
That explains that comic, because I have comics based on those games. And one of them, Link literally goes to a different dimension and solves their problem in the alternate dimension.
Well,
he goes back in time.
In one of them, he also goes between dimensions. But the original Legend of Zelda has a whole other game in it if you beat it.
So that's the whole thing in the comics was about.
And that was the same thing in Pokemon. You beat the second game, and you're like, wow. And then it's like, hey, do you want to go back to Kanto? And you're like, wait, really? I can play the original game as well?
Yeah.
And another amazing one was Roller Coaster Tycoon.
Yeah.
They wrote that game in machine code.
Oh.
Because they wanted to make it fit on the disc. So there was people trying to hack the game to mod it. And they're like, okay, so where's the... they like contacted the developers. Can we get the source code? They're like, there isn't any. What? It's like, yeah, we wrote it in machine code. And oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Jeez.
So with the Heroes of Might and Magic thing...
Yeah.
So when they started work on the game, they had concept art drawn up for the creatures and the various different models. And then that was around the time that a lot of companies were going 3D.
Yeah.
And they had a 3D artist who was ungodly skilled with a very, very powerful machine.
Yeah.
And they created 3D models for the game. And these models were better than basically any other models in the world at that time.
Is that why 4 looks worse?
Yes.
Oh.
That's part of the reason. So they had amazing artists.
Because it's the exact same technique, right, for 4?
No. 4 is 3D.
Oh, it's not 2D.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so 3, then they're like, okay, we're going to try to put this in the game. And they put, I think, like a couple of units in, and the game was too big for a CD.
Right.
And so they then, through hours upon hours of recording, because making the animations go through takes forever back then.
Yeah.
They made those 3D models do their animation loops.
Right, and then sliced them into 2D.
Yeah, and basically took pictures of them.
Wow. So Donkey Kong did that, Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah.
And so does Factorio.
Yes.
And Factorio is actually a modern game that is impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, very, very impressive. Like,
Yeah.
most modern games, they're so lazy, and they have no idea what they're doing. But Factorio is not one of them.
Yeah.
It's very impressive. Yeah, actually, I wanted to learn some coding, so I was taking a coding tutorial on YouTube. And she was talking about writing a program to find prime numbers.
Yeah.
And so how she made the program run is she says, okay, so a prime number is a number that can only be divided by 1 in itself.
Yeah.
So what you do is you divide it by every number between it and 1. And anytime you get a remainder, you say... Well, anytime you don't get a remainder,
Yeah.
it's not a prime number. So if you're going along and you get like 2.0000, then it's like, oh, well, that's not a prime number because it works. But if you divide 27 by 6, and you get 4.3333, and you're like, or whatever it is, then you go, oh, okay, so this might be a prime number. Okay, we'll divide it by 7, then we'll divide it by 8, then we'll divide it by 9. So the thing that got me a little bit about it was you're making this program for a number like... so what she made the program do was determine all prime numbers between 1 and 10,000.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, is 1 a prime number? Okay, is 2 a prime number? Is 3 a prime number? And so for each of those numbers, so 10,000 times within each of those numbers, it has to do... So for number 10,000, it has to do 10,000 calculations.
Yeah.
And for number 9,999, it has to do 9,999 calculations. So you're doing
Many.
Yeah. It's actually fairly 500,000 calculations.
Yeah.
You're doing 500,000 calculations to find this. Slightly less because the moment it finds out it's not a prime number, it can stop and it can move to the next one. But what you can also do is say, by the time you get halfway through the number, you don't have to keep calculating, because if you've already divided by 2, the rest of the number is irrelevant, right? Because you have 26, you divide it by 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you've covered 1 and 26. You divide it by 2, that's 13. You've now covered 13 to 26.
Yeah.
Those numbers aren't going to be divisors of 26 whatsoever.
Yeah.
She didn't put that into the program. And so she was just given a tutorial, right?
Yeah.
But the programming can be used to be very lazy about mathematics.
Yeah.
When you can instead... And I believe... Newton or maybe it was... No, I think it was... what's his name? Anyways, I think there is actually a way... It wasn't Newton, I don't think. But to much more quickly determine if a number is prime or not. Yeah. Like a mathematical formula. Now, she was just giving an example of using loops within loops. Yeah. Right? So maybe that was the only purpose there. But it made me think, how many programmers out there just brute force solutions instead of using like... Newton's method or something to determine the square root of something, or using there is, you can have or almost have the number of calculations necessary with a tiny little tweak to her program.
So like one of the problems with coding, and this is just the fault of Java, so if you play Bedrock Edition Minecraft and you've only played it, you actually might not know this problem exists, but there's this thing called memory leak.
Yeah.
In Java Edition, and the longer you play Minecraft, the more of the game's data gets stored in your RAM, and that can cause your computer to crash. It can cause the game to crash. In some bad cases, it can destroy your RAM
card.
And The longer your computer has been running, the more memory leak builds up in a RAM card.
Another good reason to turn your computer off once in a while.
Yes.
Yeah.
So memory leak comes from poor coding.
Yeah, so you point to a variable and then you don't stop pointing to it, is from what I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so your computer keeps...
So the computer dedicates a section of the RAM to that variable, even if it's not in use.
And this is why servers have to turn themselves off and on again and have these little restarts in Minecraft.
Right.
Is because the server that's running it actually gets memory leak as well.
But memory leak is not a side effect. Like, it's not inevitable. You can avoid it, right?
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Bedrock doesn't give your computer memory leak.
Do you remember?
Java does.
And why don't they fix it? They don't know what's doing it, or?
It's because you can't fix it when using Java code.
Oh. So it's Java's fault, or?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, they've optimized Minecraft a lot.
Why doesn't Java fix itself?
The fundamental system of Java doesn't allow for it. Java's a good but not good programming language.
Huh. Do you remember?
It has a deep flaw because basically when they were doing coding originally, and Java's one of the older coding languages, and memory leaks weren't a problem because you would never run a program to the excess with the amount of data that could leak before restarting a computer. That memory problem would
you just run the program, get the answer, turn it off.
So Java's leakiness wasn't actually an issue.
Do you remember? So our dad's a programmer,
Yeah.
and he was working. I think it was the medical records this happened. The servers kept crashing after he had written a new bit of code.
Yeah.
And so he was trying to figure out what was going on. And he realized what he had done was he had set it to, it was something like copy the entire medical record to a separate folder every 1,000th of a second or something. Yeah. And so he would fill the entire server with like 10,000 copies of the entire territory's medical records. And it was just like... And it was just like one variable he accidentally put in the wrong place.
So the mod server I'm playing on, we had to remove 2 mods from it.
Yeah.
So one of the mods was, I don't know what the bug was, but it was a dummy. And if you touch the dummy, it would crash the game.
Yeah.
And if you're like, it crashes the game. And I said, don't touch the dummy again.
Yeah.
Then someone was like, I punched the dummy and want to see how much I crash the game. I said, don't do that again. And when I'm saying that, it's because I know every time you break Minecraft, you actually damage your world irrevocably. Because that's in the game's data file of the crash, and so it builds up code. And people kept doing that, and eventually we had that mod removed. But it was just one problem, so that was making the game more and more unstable. The other problem is there's these giant lizards spawning everywhere, and their spawn rate never stops. So know how with cows, you can get about 20 cows and they'll stop spawning in chunk?
Yeah.
The lizards didn't have that. So not only do they stop everything else from the area spawning, but they don't stop.
Right, so you have to kill them.
Yeah. So we didn't cull them for a bit, and someone had the server running for a while in the area. There's another mod which puts portals randomly in trees, which load an entire different world. So these lizards culminated around a tree and started going back and forth in between the portal ratably. And so whenever you loaded the world and you're too close to the lizards in that portal, it crashed the game. And that portal was where everyone's buildings were.
Oh.
And so every time we launched the game would crash. And people were like, my game runs just fine. And so I basically started making people wonder about, because I think I figured out the problem. I was like, could you walk to spawn, please, and kill some of those lizards? And it's like, okay, person walked to spawn, their game crashed the server, and they couldn't play anymore. So I was like, I'm just fine. I think a specific team was like, come to the center of the map. So, okay, here's it, man. And they crashed the game. And so I basically very much quickly told everyone, okay, this is the problem. Because people like theorizing, like, maybe it's this, maybe it's like, no. You have damaged our game file by punching these stupid dummies over and over again. And so the game doesn't have enough backup memory in the server to deal with these lizards to give us enough time to kill them all. We can't go server side, because if you get close enough for them to load, so like using console commands, to kill them, it'll crash the game before you can kill them.
I don't quite understand why the punching the dummies would permanently damage the game. Like, wouldn't it...
Any crash to a Minecraft world damages it.
But why? Because surely it just roll back to its previous save, right? So
it doesn't. That's the problem with Java. That's why there's memory leak.
I don't know enough about it, so...
Yeah, but anyway, so we had those removed. And then so I was like, it works now. And I was like, that's what I thought we had to do.
Yeah,
basically, so if you load back, it will fix it, but that's not how Minecraft worlds work when they crash. So worlds can crash and die forever, and you need a backup.
Yeah.
But if you crash the world and then reload it, it's going to basically look into its past. Because part of Minecraft, why it can load the whole world, is it actually looks into its past quite a bit.
Yeah, I assume it just adds the changes, not stores the entire world. So I assume what happens is it loads the world as it was before anything was touched, using the same procedural generation.
Yeah.
And then it says these are all the changes added to it.
So it's going along, and so it's loading it. So it loads you broke a block. And so if you put down an object that crashes the game, or entity you touch and it breaks the game, it's going to go along as load, and it's going to check that entity.
Yeah.
And find the interaction with it if that can change the game state.
So the potentially genius part about Minecraft, and I don't know what they do here, if I break a block, replace it with a stone block, break that stone block, replace it with a wood block, break that wood block, and replace it with one of the original dirt blocks.
Yeah.
Does the memory file contain every single interaction, or does it only contain the latest? Or is it even smart enough to say, hey, this is the original, I can delete my stored information on this position?
I don't know that far, but basically crash objects, like if you have something that breaks your game in Minecraft, you should remove it. Like it's not, like if you have a mod pack, it's like, oh, just don't touch that thing. No, don't touch the thing, delete it from your file.
So is that why the Quarry Mod caused lag? Because it had to load like 1,000 missing blocks, essentially?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to load blocks, it has to load missing blocks or changed blocks.
Yes.
So that'd be
the coding has been updated, so that's no longer a problem.
Now what would be interesting would be if the quarry was only able to work on a chunk, right?
Yeah.
And then you just told it, don't load this chunk.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah, so they fixed the coding so that quarries actually work now in Minecraft.
Right. I mean, they did. It's just...
Yeah.
I mean, it's genius, whatever they do for save
Yeah,
games.
no, there's an update, I think it is in 1.12.2, which was the modding update, which basically made so a bunch more mods could work, and then people stopped doing the insane cool mods. And like, there's some good ones, but like, everyone moved on and like went to college.
Well, they're just waiting for 1.19.
Yeah.
I mean, the modding wasn't 1.12. 1.7.10 was huge, but before that, Tekkit was the huge thing, right?
Yeah.
And that was beta, right? Minecraft beta, I think.
Yeah.
Because we started playing just when the beta came out, I believe.
Yeah.
Because we never really... You played alpha, I didn't really. And...
I barely played alpha.
Yeah. And then I played the free demo Notch had on his website, and I was so hooked immediately. I think I bought a copy for both of us or something. I was just like...
You bought one copy that was ours.
Yeah. Right, yeah. And then I think
we both bought.
Yeah, I don't remember how it worked. It was way cheaper back then.
Yeah, but I've spent twice as much.
Well, I've bought several people copies of it now. I bought Jonas a copy, I think.
Yeah, you actually might have bought my copy as well.
I think I bought yours so you'd stop using my account.
Yeah.
I do that a lot.
But your account that we had, we both paid for. We split 50-50.
I need to buy Skyrim for you. Actually, I was thinking about that. What do you think So I've been playing a lot of Here's My Magic.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking like, man, the more I play this game, the more I like it. Mm-hmm. Which is saying something. Because I think I've played Here's My Magic 3 more than any other game.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true for you.
No.
Not because you haven't played a whole lot of Here's My Magic 3.
Yeah.
But you've played... Like, Minecraft, I think, must be your number one game. Like,
so, just on this load of multi-MC, it lets you know how much you played. So this is multi-MC. This is including Curse Forge and other things.
Yeah.
I have something... I think I'm near 800 hours.
Yeah. I mean, compare that, though, to many, like, countless 4-hour sessions of Here's My Magic while we wait for our dad while he's acting.
And also 1 hour every 2 days.
Yeah, for...
years.
Well, from the time you were 4 to 18, roughly.
I'd say 17.
Yeah.
16.
Yeah.
No, 15. 15 for me.
Okay. Within that range, yeah. Like every other day, basically.
Yeah.
For an hour. And, I mean, that... So you get 150 hours a year. That's not actually... Well, it is a lot, but it's... Man, can you imagine if we had The Witcher when we were like 8 and we'd like, this is our only game we can play?
Well, so 150 divided by 2.
Why?
Because we are only here half the time.
Right. So like 75.
75.
Yeah.
And then can we even extrapolate the time our dad's?
Well, 150 times 4-ish. So
Yeah,
so like 600. Yeah, so about 700 hours a year for like 10 years. So like 7,000 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it being around that. Yeah, it's a lot.
I'd say a little less. I'm going to err on 5,000.
Yeah. And we did it, like, we played Age of Wonders and we played
Dragon Age.
Yeah. So
Age of Empires.
But yeah, played it a lot. I was thinking, because it's funny because it's not on our Steam list at all, right? And but I was thinking, you know, what game have I played the most? Like, oh, it's got to be like Age of Wonders or something because it's my number one on the Steam. Well, it's not because someone plays a lot of Skyrim, but
I play also a lot of Skyrim offline mode, so it doesn't even track that.
Yeah, and a lot of Dota.
Mm-hmm.
But for you, I imagine it's more like Minecraft is number one, and then Dota still might be number two. I don't know.
Yeah, Dota's definitely number two.
And then Battle Brothers and
Dota's
Skyrim?
weird number two because a lot of time you sit there not playing the game.
Right. I mean, you used to do that with Skyrim though. Like you wouldn't turn your computer off; you just leave it running.
Yeah, that's not something you should do with Skyrim either.
No. Well, it's cool because it creates that cinematic like spinning camera.
Yeah, Skyrim's interesting because so when you launch a game of Skyrim and you have mods, you should leave the game for about an hour
To
load the mods in. They made it faster and improve some things, but maybe not an hour. But you should like leave the game for a good 5 minutes.
Can you just rest?
No.
Because cell updating is based on in-game time,
Yeah.
right? So you can rest to update all the cells in the world.
I suppose you could test, but it's just like leaving it for about 5 minutes will update everything now with how people improve mods. But Skyrim's a game, which is... So a lot of games, if you don't leave anything going, what it's going to do is it's going to just like loop an animation in the background. So you leave Dota in its menu, it's going to run the Dota menu. If you... Even Factorio to a certain extent, if you leave Factorio running and you're not playing with a world of bugs, it'll do day and night cycles and it'll move forwards and like things will happen. But because of Skyrim's towns and how they actually made it so NPCs live lives and systems happen
it's always
and
calculated.
animals hunt,
Yeah.
it's going to continually run calculations. So if you just leave Skyrim running in the game state and your character's standing somewhere safe...
It's still using full power.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
It's
games don't like using full power.
It's like Europa Universalis. Wait, I imagine that game uses full power at all times as well.
Yeah, no, your computer doesn't like using its full power.
Like Factorio probably does as well. It's just
Factorio is so
it's just
clean
so good
to
at
me.
calculating.
Yeah, and Factorio is so clean, it doesn't have these...
Yeah. Well, I think what Factorio... Well, the only thing I can think it does, I don't know what it does, but the only thing that makes sense is that there's two games being played simultaneously, an animation and a simple math calculation.
That's a lot of games.
Like, I don't think the moving things correspond. Like, I don't think every time a iron piece moves into your machine, it ticks the counter by 1. I think it I could be wrong here. I don't know what they're doing, but I imagine it's more like this is the rate of mining and flowing. Yeah. This is how much you tick it up by per second or something.
It's probably doing something like that.
Although you can like sucks off of a conveyor belt and put a hole in it. So
I mean,
I don't know what's going on there.
Dota does the same thing that Smash Bros does. Like, the replays.
Yeah, it just saves.
Yeah, they get deleted if the game updates. Well, that's if you actually. So you can request a Dota replay, and they'll actually give you a video. No, it doesn't give you a video. Yeah, no, they break.
Yeah. Well, you can save the video replay with.
Oh, that's what they did. They had an update in Dota where you can actually look at them because Dota holds every old instance of itself within the game.
So, Super Mario Maker.
Yeah.
You can only upload a level that you can beat.
Yeah.
The problem is they update the game.
Yeah.
So every map you play in Super Mario Maker is actually played on the version it was uploaded with.
Yeah.
So that's how they get around.
Yeah, that's the Dota replays. That's how they fix that. Because it was broken for a while, and then people were like, oh, I can't go watch TI1 with full freedom.
But Smash Bros. Is such a massively complicated game. You can't do that because you would take up like...
Well, Smash Bros. Is like a 3 game with launching all over the place. Dota has 2 planes. There's this plate, there's ground, and there's air.
Dota is dots that shoot spreadsheets at each other.
Yeah.
It's just like...
Yes, it is.
It's like... Although actually, it is 3-dimensional, right? Like you can actually...
Yeah, no...
There's a physics engine.
Yeah, there's a physics engine. Like, the very dumb thing that happened, where it's mostly with Mars. but he throws a spear at someone, and his spear's deal is it catches them and moves them towards the object. Now, if he hits a wall, a building, a cliffside, whatever, the person gets stuck to it and stunned. That's Mars's deal, is he wants to stick you to things. Now, any character in the game that has a lift, which is basically knock someone in the air, if someone's knocked in the air while caught by Mars' spear, they will travel over objects that would stick them things. So, if, like,
They just go flying.
yeah, so, like, you're like, oh, I got this perfect stun, this cliffside. And then your ally comes up, and they cast a lift on them. It's like, oh, well, now he's over the cliff. We don't have cliff climbing, and he can run away.
It's like in Dragon Warrior 3, when we used Buddha Palm on the guy using Shadow Step. And so he just went flying.
Yeah.
Because he was in the air. So, I wanted to follow up on what we talked about last time a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not going to read all of this, probably. But we were talking about this idea of dedicating yourself to an ideology thoroughly. And I also talked about, remember, like it was like 2 or 3 ago, where I had written down something in my like sleepy delirium about...
That was a while ago, sleepy delirium, but yeah.
But how people are looking for an ideology to fill the void left by God.
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't that long ago. That was like...
Oh, that one was long ago.
Like
I thought you were talking about your absolute insane writing that made no sense.
Well, not true. It makes sense. Like, I was watching this quantum physicist today, and he was talking about all this stuff, and all the comments are like, this doesn't make any sense, this doesn't make any sense. And I was thinking, hey, this is what we talked about on the podcast. Just a scientific way to look at it. Because I didn't approach it from the scientific side. Mine was more of just a theoretical...
Maybe it's time for the nuts to bury the squirrels!
So, and I'm not saying I'm so smart I understand. I actually do just have more of a background in theoretical physics. Not in practical physics for some reason, but like Newtonian classical physics.
Well, you'll have a background in theoretical physics if you read Orson Scott Card.
I guess there is a degree of that, yeah. And it's not a very extensive background, but I have one which allows me... Because the physicist was trying to talk in very simple terms. Yeah. And so if you have a little background, it's fairly simple to understand. Yeah. But if you don't know what he's talking about, the simple terms don't matter.
Yeah.
So much. So I talked about how people want to replace it as their religion. So I read yesterday...
Physics as a religion, or just...
No, like the state, like communism.
Is like the state.
Yeah, is the replacement for God, to fill that void in people, to make you feel to feel part of something larger.
Yeah.
So yesterday I read Mussolini's Manifesto on Fascism.
Yeah.
That is literally what he says. He says fascism is a religion. It should replace all religion. So Mussolini agrees with me in my deranged state. So
okay.
Yeah. Okay. So what we were talking about last time was people wanting a ruler to feel this in-group preference. Yeah. So I just want to quote a different thinker who thought of this. So the masses of people prefer the ruler to the suppliant. Someone who
is supple.
Someone who keeps saying like, "Oh, I'll do that for you. I'll do that for you." Yeah. Someone who leads, who rules, who's strong. And are filled with a stronger sense of mental security by a teacher that brooks no rival than by teaching which offers them a liberal choice. What is with a stronger sense of mental security by a teaching that brooks no rival. So you're saying this is the way, this is the only way. Then by a teaching which offers them a liberal choice. Oh, so they prefer a single answer to someone that says, here's some options, a liberal choice.
They prefer my way or the highway over there's many paths you can take.
People don't like liberalism because then they have to think.
Yes.
Yeah. They have very little idea of how to make such a choice, and thus are prone to feel that they have been abandoned. See, that's the part we were missing right there, actually.
Yeah.
Why don't people like choice? Because you've been abandoned. You've been told... Yeah, so you know when you go to someone for advice, and they're like, well, you could do this or this, and you're like, I wanted you to help me. I wanted you to tell me what to do. So that is what...
This problem is a massive thing in relationships, and it falls the nice guy issue.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we even had rules, but where do you want to eat?
Yeah.
I don't know. You decide. You don't know. And
well, you don't want to... If it's a bad restaurant, you don't have to be the authority of you having made that mistake. Yeah. So people prefer to have no choice, because if you're given a choice, you feel abandoned. That is brilliant. So, this is from Mein Kampf.
Okay. What you're reading right now?
What I just read.
Ah.
That was Hitler.
Mm.
He wasn't stupid, obviously, because he was right. He had a theory, he put it into practice, and it worked.
Yeah.
But yeah, he actually had the missing piece in there. Being given a choice makes you feel abandoned.
Yeah.
That is actually brilliant. What a great thinker. I wish he was alive to talk. I should shoot the guy that killed him. He brought tragedy to us all. So I thought that just totally meshed with what we were talking about. Like Hitler totally agrees with us.
I mean, what we were talking about in the agreement, though, is how ideology can take over and be horrible.
We were saying this is what happens. You end up like the Nazis.
How does a purity spiral happen?
Yeah, you end up like the Nazis. And Hitler said, this is how I'm going to create the Nazis. Mm-hmm. So he's agreeing that we had the correct interpretation of how Nazism arises. So if Hitler looked at the SJWs today, he'd say, yeah, that is exactly what I was trying to do back then.
Yeah.
Like, that is exactly...
Well, there's that parody comic, or cartoon, I think it's done by Freedom Tunes, where, there's all these Nazis in the world. We're going to go back in time and get the people who beat the Nazis in the first place. Yeah. And so the group of unnaturally colored hair students go back in time and they get some soldiers from World War II and they bring them back to fight the Nazis in today's world. And then the soldiers are very confused with the people they're supposed to fight. And then the people are there like to talk about their beliefs. And then they're like, you're a Nazi. It's like, wait. And then the soldier's like, wait a minute, no, you guys are actually being a lot like Nazis here.
So the other thing we talked about was what was the other thing we talked about? The most dangerous people being the fanatics.
Yeah.
So Mussolini, you were talking about earlier today. You're saying, why are all the artists the people that become the dictators? Yeah. And that's because they're the progressives, right? Artists are people that aren't afraid to push boundaries to become leaders, to change things. And so they're the same type of people that will start movements, that will lead movements. And, people like Stalin are actually more interesting or not interesting, but insidious in a way, because, I mean, maybe he has an artsy background, but he was a secretary, and he was just very, very clever.
Yeah.
Not morally clever, though, because it led...
I think Stalin was a lawyer.
His paranoia led to his death, directly. Because people became so afraid to question anything he did, they became afraid to help him in any way, including when he had a heart attack.
Yeah, and he also got rid of all the doctors that could have helped him anyways.
Yeah. And he had a stroke, and then he... nobody wanted to go help him out.
Yeah.
So he caused his own... Like, maybe he wouldn't have been saved either way, but if everyone had loved him and crowded around him... they might have been able to get to him in time.
Yeah.
And get him to a gulag where he could be saved by someone that knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
Actually, it's really interesting. What was that doctor? The German doctor. The evil dude. The White Angel.
The Death Doctor?
Yeah, the White Angel of Death. Anyways, the guy that kind of advanced science more than any other person in history. You know him?
Medical science.
One of his top assistants was a brilliant Jew who was in the Gulag at the time. He went to him and said, like, hey, can you help me out with this? And then when they got...
Wasn't the doctor killed in the Nuremberg trials?
No, he fled to Argentina.
No.
He's
one of the people that actually went there?
Yeah, no, he escaped. He was hunted for his whole life, and he constantly moved countries. He ended up dying in Brazil of old age. But he went, like, all around the South America, just running from Nazi hunters.
How are you going to catch the guy? He's an expert in hyperthermia.
But he, this doctor assistant of his, he ended up killing every single person in the camp. Not the doctor assistant, the... Dr. Death guy. Yeah. He killed everyone in the camp eventually. I think they got sick, so he decided, like, lost cause. We don't have enough resources to help this place, so he killed them all. Ended up losing them. But it's interesting that he recognized the genius of the Jewish doctor, but he still continued doing what he was doing.
Yeah.
So anyways, Mussolini was a socialist when he was younger. He wanted to, do what socialists do, overthrow the bourgeoisie, have the rise of the proletariat, that sort of thing. So nobody knows for sure what changed his mind. So only Mussolini knows, right? And maybe even he doesn't know entirely, but this is my interpretation. So during World War I, Italy didn't want to get involved.
Yeah.
Well, different parts of it. Some parts of Italy wanted to get involved, some parts didn't.
Yeah.
The socialists didn't want to get involved. Mussolini did, I think. Or the other way around. Maybe Mussolini didn't want to get involved. Anyway, so he had fallen out with the party because they were either warlike when he didn't want to be, or they weren't warlike when he wanted to be.
Yeah.
So he had a falling out with them. But he also had a contention with socialism, which was that it set Italians against each other. It set one class against the other. So what he envisioned was a classless society, an inclusive society, where everyone was subordinate to the state. And so it meant that there was a hierarchy within the state.
Yeah.
But it would be similar to like your office. You're all on a team together, or a sports team, let's say a basketball team. You're all on a team together. You might have a captain, but you're all in it together. Yeah. And so that was his idea, was Italy, everyone should be working together. You shouldn't be divided by class. You shouldn't be divided by political belief. You shouldn't be divided by religion. You should all be united in your love for the state.
Yeah.
And so what fascism is a wholehearted devotion to the state. It rejects liberalism because liberalism focuses on happiness, individual pursuits and happiness. And why that's bad is he considered that a shallow pursuit. He wanted you to follow something not as trivial as happiness, but like something meaningful with legacy. And
kind of similar to the group that hated gambling and having fun in the Catholic faith. You should devote all your time to God and not.
Yeah. And in his case, it would be something along the lines of, how Jordan Peterson, he talks about wasting your time with things that make you feel empty, like I don't know, let's say visiting a prostitute or something, right? Like there's nothing there. Mm-hmm. There's nothing of substance there. Now a lot of people like to go to video games, but I don't know if Jordan Peterson would entirely, and if he did, he would be wrong, in my opinion, because
his opinion on video games is they can be quite enjoyable.
Yeah, anything can be abused.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. He's basically anything can be abused, and he talks about there's certain things people take, and it's what you want from your life.
So people talk about how you're rotting your brain watching television, but you're appreciating the arts when you watch television, right? There is a different way to look at everything, and it's the same difference having a loving relationship with your spouse versus going to a prostitute every weekend. That is a different thing. They're the same activity to some extent. They are an emotional connection, primarily for men. It is just emotional.
Well, so Pearson talked about alcohol.
Yeah.
And he was saying that when he was younger, he would drink a lot more and then suffer from a hangover. And so he didn't drink, basically. At a certain point, he decided to stop drinking. And it's not that he's against alcohol. He's saying it's fine to drink, but he's against it for himself because he didn't like himself when he was drinking.
Yeah. And so I think with stuff like video games and movies and whatnot, they're fine if you're pursuing them in the spirit of creativity or just in embracing and enjoying, but not if they're a substitute for the hole in your life, the desperate clawing for meaning. That isn't. And so Mussolini said the pursuit of happiness is a fool's errand where you're just desperately clawing for meaning. You should replace everything. The state should become God. Like he literally said it should become your religion. Like in those words, the state is your religion. And so he didn't like communism because it set the classes against each other. Yeah. He didn't want a revolution of the classes. He wanted the classes to unite into a strong state. Yeah. So the aspect of fascism which makes it hard to define is that it is state. It is the devotion to the state. But it is the devotion to the state of the country. So Italy was a very warrior culture type country. Yeah. So a fascist Italy is a warrior warrior state. Yeah. Whereas fascist Switzerland might be a money-making state. Or
money and chocolate.
Yeah. Or like fascist...
fascist Britain would be putting their values onto everyone else.
Yeah, or... it would be civilizing the world. Yeah. It would be devoting everything to civilizing the world. Yeah. Rome. Well, you could say Rome probably was in a way. Well, no, Rome was more devoted to this like Caesar. So no,
Yeah.
It was more of a imperial.
And they had religion.
Yeah. So
is the Imperium fascist?
the Imperium of Man. Well, they're more like a theocracy, right? Because they're all devoted to the emperor.
Well, they're also kind of devoted to a system, like you do everything for the empire.
Yeah. So, and you could say that their state, their way of being is a theocracy.
Yeah.
But they are a fascist state devoted to their theocracy. So yeah, probably is fascist. Yeah. So I don't know if I can call Canada fascist. Because so what you can do, right, is you can say fascism in Canada. Canada is a place of let's say diversity. The attempted fascist state of Canada would have to be for this formulation to work.
Yeah.
Would have to be that Canada is a country where devoted the state of Canada is one of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And the citizens' individual goals are secondary to creating this diverse system.
So if you gave Canada the One Ring,
yeah. So well, it's what would you devote all citizens' effort to, right? And
that's what I'm saying. Like the One Ring.
Yeah. It would. So does Canada's commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity supersede its commitment to the individual and the self? And that, I would say no. So I don't think Canadians are fascist. However, the government can be fascist, right? It can be attempting to establish this. And for that too, it would have to say, we want you to submit yourself to the state before your friends and family and whatnot. And I think it is saying that to an extent. But nationalism is very weird in a Canadian sense because you could say that Canadian nationalism is hatred of Canadians, but that would be very weird.
Why say hatred of Canadians?
Well, because why not make Canadians the number one priority instead of immigrants? So, as in, why not give Canadians everything? So if you're a nationalistic country, you want to give your people everything, right?
Yeah.
But that isn't the case in Canada, I don't think. Like, because...
A part of Canadians is letting in other people.
Yes. I think I might be getting this wrong just in terms of... So nationalism would be your country first, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't preclude immigration, but that means the immigrants have to adapt to your country.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you immigrate to the UK, you have to be civilized.
Yeah.
If you immigrate to...
in the British sense.
Yeah. If you immigrate to America, you have to pursue the American dream.
Yeah. And Canada, we like to...
If you go to Germany, you have to be industrious.
Canada likes to have the idea that we can support multiple cultures within it, which I don't really think is true, because kind of the definition of a culture is that it is different, right? So I think you can take the bits that had no equivalent, like let's say colorful clothing from India.
Yeah.
That doesn't have a moral opposite in anything of Canadians.
I think what
and so that is what they mean by multicultural, I think, typically. But melting pot, I think, would be a better way to look at it.
Well, that ideally Canada is a melting pot, and I think it actually melting pot. It has to be a melting pot. So, cultural appropriation is actually a
it is a
opposition to this.
Yeah, it's very separatist,
because like we in Whitehorse, there is a lot of Sikhs.
Yeah,
like we have a lot of Sikhs, and melting pot wise, the Sikh turban should become a fashion that people wear if they want to.
Yeah.
But anyone who's not Sikh won't wear a turban because you could get in trouble for that, because cultural appropriation. So the thought of being progressive and encouraging cultural diversity is an anathema to the Canadian ideal of embracing culture and diversity.
It's the common joke that progressivism is the wet dream of ethno-nationalists, because it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. Like that isn't hyperbole. It is literally the same thing. If you want to keep people in their own little bubble, and keep them all unique and special. That is ethno-nationalism.
But if we take the Canadian values
Yeah.
of before basically saying you can no longer eat other people's cultures or like melt them in.
Yeah.
So we have the animus or the not animus, the spiritualism of our First Nations. We actually do have that here. We have.
I wouldn't say it's fully incorporated.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's fully incorporated, but we have the morals of the British. We have, I don't know, we do have something from the French Canadians. We've got like the art of France.
Well, we look down on the Americans, so we've got the arrogance of the French.
Yeah, but we also have the art. We do have that. We have the art of them, the very much appreciation of beauty. Like we have that sort of
the love of cheese.
Yeah, like even like I'm saying art. So like culinarily.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Germans, and we actually.
Well, the athleticism of the French would be the huge one, I think.
Yeah,
the adventurousness of the Germans.
Yeah, the Germans really like exploring. There's a bunch of Poles here, and we've got some stuff from Poland. And in the case of Chinese that came over, we have a lot of the food Chinese.
But none of these cultures are really that they're very integrated in the sense that they have to follow all baseline Canadian values except where their culture can fit in, right? Yeah. Like you can have a Chinese food restaurant, that's fine, but you cannot eat dogs, let's say.
Yeah. But I'm saying like they are melting together slowly.
Yeah. But a Filipino is not going to worship in the same way as a Southern Shoshone person.
No.
Our culture is very fractured, very fragmented. Fractured is the wrong word. It hasn't coalesced.
Yeah.
It's uncoagulated.
Yeah.
It's disparate, maybe. It's like a nebula that has yet to form a star.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll get there, but not with this cultural appropriation nonsense.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There was multiple First Nation elders at my school that went out of their way to teach kids First Nation language, First Nation culture, because they love sharing it.
Yeah.
Japanese people love sharing it.
Yeah, well, like, I was talking about this weird thing, so I have 2 objects in this room we're recording, which are art pieces, First Nation art pieces.
Yeah. So,
those are very much the sense of cultural appropriation, these 2 art pieces.
Yeah.
So, I made both of them. Under cultural appropriation, I shouldn't have made them. Now, I was taught to make them by elders and First Nation artists as a program of this is the art of the place we live in.
Yeah.
And I integrated into them my own artistic preferences.
Yeah, so actually what you're doing is you are learning the culture of the place you live in.
Yeah.
Which is good. That's what you should do, right? You should. And now if you want to be a hero and change the culture, you can do that. But well, that is dangerous and risky.
Well, I did that, and the risk is sort of there, sort of not there.
Yeah.
So with the paddle I made, now a lot of people were putting a raven on it or a salmon. Like a salmon is very common in this paddle design. It's a rattle paddle. But I didn't like the salmon. I don't like the way the salmon looks in this art style. And so I asked the elder who was like helping me with the drawings, like, how do I do a whale? And they're like, okay, this is how we draw a whale. And I liked the way the whale looked a lot better, but this is like I moved out of that and went even further. At this school I went to, we did art projects, and we were supposed to personalize them. And at the time, I was quite a big fan of Egyptian art.
Yeah. And
so I made a fusion of Egyptian and Shoshone art.
Well, you know what the thing is?
So we were supposed to have one thing. There was a mural with a bird on it, and it was a raven. But I combined the raven with the rebirth of Ra, and we were supposed to make a handprint and draw what's important into us. And I put the Eye of Horus on a totem pole. So there's a totem pole with my hand on it, and in the center of the hand is the Eye of Horus.
So the one thing around here, which I need to ask our mom about again, because she knows more about this stuff than me. I'm pretty sure this is all really recent, anyways. Like this Shoshone art, because this is coastal art.
Yes, it is coastal art.
Around here, we're one of the few places on Earth that had almost no art because it was so miserable to live. You didn't have time for anything else.
Yeah.
Like, even the Inuit could do art because they spent their time, like, half the year just kind of huddling in a tent.
So this is art from the BC.
But around here, you couldn't even huddle in...
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, they adopted the coast of the East Coast.
Yeah, like the Haida.
Yeah, the East Coast. This
the
is
West.
West Coast, yes.
Yeah. West Coast art,
Yeah, this is all West Coast.
Yeah, because, like, totem poles are right out around here.
Yeah.
But even intricate paintings, like, you're not making pigments around here.
No.
You find a berry to make a pigment from, you eat it.
If you want to go with the actual art here, we were to do the art of the Tishoni, it is beadwork. It is beadwork and clothing.
And now the beadwork's weird because, from what I understand, they got that from the Russians.
Yes, they did.
And so, it's like the traditional artwork comes from European trade.
Yeah.
From before Cartier.
So the beadwork they got from Russians, though...
It was like from the Sampi or whatever, I think, right?
Yeah, but that was before Columbus.
Yeah.
Like, this is old Russian trading.
Well, I think Cartier was before Columbus, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was too, but this is really old Russian trading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, because they're, like, right next to each other.
Yeah, and so it moved up and down the coast and then spread out, and then this is the art they could do here.
And you see, like, they had, like, very nicely made axes and flint and arrows and whatnot. So I think that's art to a degree.
Yeah.
And there's carved antlers. That's a thing around here quite a bit. So carvings tend to be the thing more than paintings.
And also architecture. The permanent house, the seasonal houses they made were very artistic on the inside of them making them.
Yes, so, I don't,
Think Canadians are fascist anyways?
No, well, now once upon a time I would have said Harper was acting fascist, but I would have been wrong, I think, now. He was being authoritarian, but not fascist. Whereas Trudeau I'd call dictatorial.
Yeah.
Like, we are... Now, we'll see if he gives up...
the power by the time this comes up.
Well, no, it doesn't even matter, does it? Because if you can't have peaceful protest, you don't live in a democracy, you live in a dictatorship.
Also, any laws brought in under the time of this act are dictatorial acts, because with this act you can bring in permanent laws and ignores things.
Yeah.
And they're already doing that.
So,
And the problem, and this happened over and over again, is it's incumbent on, if in the next election a different party takes over, then the first things they should do is, I know it's kind of like, they obliterate everything past one thing, but they actually, like, righteously why they got in will be because of this, and righteously they should destroy any laws that are brought in under emergency.
Well, so here's the thing, right?
But those laws are always left over, and basically what happens is it'll go back and forth, side to side, those laws always get in, and it builds up, until people rise up with guillotines.
Yeah, exactly. So, people in the next election, I think, like Liberals, NDP, they're going to be voting Conservative.
Yeah.
That isn't going to solve anything.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's incumbent on the Conservatives to get rid of anything that was brought in under these acts.
Once the Conservatives get in, they will then be the people with all the power, and then they'll say, well, why should I give it up? It's mine, isn't it?
Well, what's interesting about that as well is I was actually talking to this about our father, and a problem, like I've talked about, it's like my turn, your turn, but I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but definitely in America and Canada, it's a race, and the winner wins. And in a democracy, the people who didn't vote for you are still people you should care about.
Yeah.
And the way that the Liberals certainly are acting right now, they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Which is...
And that's the exact same thing. Clinton, that was Clinton's... Well, a lot of people say it cost her the election. Her basket of deplorables statement. Yeah. It's like, if I win, I will hate half the country.
Yeah, and...
That's a terrible thing to say.
But also, Pearson was talking about this recently, and you go by opinion polls. So what's the popular topic? Like, people ask, how did the Liberals win? Everyone was running on the same platform the Liberals were running on.
Yeah, there is no other option.
Yeah, it was all the same shoes, just different colors.
It's, well, you have the People's Party, or you have the other.
Or the Bloc. But the Bloc will never...
Yeah. You have the People's Party, you have the Bloc, or you have your favorite color of progressive WEF propaganda.
And they switch while running, and it's whatever's most popular. And what the Bloc run on And what the People's Party is run on, which I think is what politicians should do, is, all right, what is our party concerned about? So first, what are the people concerned about? All right, how does that line up with what we're concerned about, like us as a group of people? Okay, these are our values. We are not going to change these values to become more appealing. It's if people want a government like this, then they'll vote for these on these values.
So the important thing is not what... You don't want the people dictating stuff. What you want is, you want the people to say, we want more money.
Mm-hmm.
The government will then take the measures to get you more money, even if the people don't like them.
Yeah.
So the people do not say, we want 2.5% less tax.
Yeah.
That's not a public decision.
Yeah.
The public says, we trust you to get us more money, and that's what we want.
Yeah.
Or, we want more rights, we trust you to get us more rights. We're not going to tell you how to do it. You do it. Because if you have rule by direct democracy, you get what we have now.
Yes.
You get what you have in Australia. You get what happened in Athens before it got destroyed.
Yeah.
So what you want is the politicians to make the hard calls to get them disliked, to get to the things that they want.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not all doom and gloom, because the War Measures Act, which Pierre Trudeau introduced, was amended to... so the one we have right now is called the Emergency Measures Act, has a lot less power.
Does it?
Yeah. It's also... it's got a lot of things that you need to do in order to invoke it.
Yeah.
Which he hasn't proven, but he successfully got the vote anyways, so...
Yeah.
I guess those safeties don't matter.
Well, there's the lawsuits against it.
But if the Conservatives get in, they may, for a publicity thing at the very least, but also because I think there is good people, right? In all the parties. I don't know why the Liberals, good people, aren't speaking up though. So there isn't good people in the Liberals. I changed my mind. If they're not speaking up, they're not good people. Like
Same with the NDP.
The guy up here, the NDP are the party that more than like the Conservatives, right?
Yeah.
Sure, they could be the state. They could love the state. They're conservatives. Like that's not big government, but they like the government where it is. They want the status quo to be maintained.
Yeah.
The Liberals have no right being called Liberals and doing what they're doing, but they're doing it, so there it is. The NDP are the Workers' Party. They should be the ones most up in arms about this more than anyone.
Well, I mean, from what Singh said, he called all the truckers racist and he dislikes them.
Yeah. Singh is a terrible. I was watching a video today of Jack Layton. Like I watched a couple of videos. So the reason Jack Layton was a part of the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
He quit them because they introduced the War Measures Act. That was the reason he joined the NDP. And then he made the NDP the party it is today, where it was in the running. It became the official opposition, the second most voted for party in Canada.
Yeah.
And he thought he could win in the next one.
Yeah.
And he died. And he took it from a joke of a nothing party to the second greatest party in Canada, and was aiming for top. And he died. And he had principle. He was like, no, the War Measure Act is way too far.
Yeah.
And he was incredibly charismatic. He talked to people. He laughed with them. And look, and that doesn't mean everything, right? Like a politician that's like Obama, right?
Yeah.
Very charismatic as well. And so Layton could have been another Obama type. But the fact that he actually had principle and quit the one party says... I mean, that's such a small thing, but it says so much. Like the guy we have up here, well, I guess he's a politician, so we can say his name, right? Like Jonas Smith. He quit the Conservatives because they went against what he believed in. And it's, so the Liberals, no, they don't have good people on their side because if they did, they would quit. Or they would get fired. So the Conservatives, they probably do have good people. And they obviously did with Jonas. And at least on that one issue.
Well, also, a lot of people in the People's Party are from the Conservatives.
Yeah. Now, so when the Conservatives get in next time, because, well, I don't know, Trudeau seems to be magical at staying in. But it could be that some of these good people will be the ones that reduce the act even further. The problem with that becomes to the point where, I don't know, Canada gets invaded by, like, the ISIS, and we have no way to actually act against them because we don't have any laws capable of giving the government the power it needs to act because they abused it so many times in the past.
Yeah, well, so I was thinking about this, because I have this trouble with arguments with people, and I recently realized what the problem was, where basically we'll talk about something, and then I say, no, that's wrong, then they'll like so freedom of speech.
Yeah.
They'll talk about it's like, oh, so in freedom of speech, then like this person can say this and this can lead to this.
Yeah.
And
you've removed personal responsibility.
Yeah. Well, there's part of that, but anyways, I've realized what I do is I always try to like come at it from a side of like reason. It's like, okay, there's this and there's this and there's this. But what I should have been saying with a lot of these cases is, no, I am willing to risk this problem you bring up, for like I'm willing to have these consequences because the abuse that can happen without them is too great.
Better to let 10 guilty men go free than to hang one innocent man.
Yes, that is what I should have been saying. It's like, no, this is the point of no return.
So what's interesting there actually is you could be wrong, right?
Yeah.
But you can at least have a discussion about the point, would you hang an innocent person to hang 10 guilty people? That is a discussion you can have.
Yeah.
Because if you have two different axioms, there's all that talking is pointless fluff. You need to decide, wait, what do we care about here?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't know that, then the whole conversation is pointless.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to tell what the core of that issue is. Like you figured it out there, obviously, but it's very hard to work down to what that point is.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, why I say that we are dictatorial right now, it sounds like an exaggeration. Like, and I'm hoping I'm wrong. Like I normally don't panic about political stuff, right? Or about like ideas don't scare me, right? Too much, like philosophical ideas, thinking about stuff. I've been having like issues with sleeping and digestion lately, and it's I had a friend who's weird in the head.
On my YouTube channel, I posted, I don't know how consistent I can be right now.
Yeah,
because it's affected me.
But what I want to get to with that is, so I have a friend. When I call them weird in the head, I don't mean negative. I mean they're different. I don't know how. That's why I'm saying that. Yeah. They are let's say queer. They're different from the norm.
Yeah.
I don't know in which way. That's why I'm not being specific, because I don't actually know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the closest analogy is like they're gay or something, right?
Yeah.
Okay. When Trump got in, they were terrified, even though he's in a different country. And I said to him, like, you really don't have any reason to fear.
Yeah.
Like, Trump is the most LGBT pro president the United States has ever had.
Yeah.
Even if he wasn't, there's a lot of things in the way that he doesn't have the power to affect. Even if he could somehow overthrow all those, that's the United States, not Canada. And all the statistics you're hearing about, here's the Guardian, left-wing source.
Yeah.
They themselves say, yeah, look, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Like, because he was also worried about white on black violence, and I was like, yeah, the Guardian says not happening, and this is the Guardian, left wing. Well, their statistics say it. You can make statistics say anything though, so it might not be fair of me to say that that's what the Guardian was trying to imply. But that's, if you look at the statistics, and he's got a strong math background, it's like it's not happening right now.
Yeah. Maybe
That's because of some weird statistical anomaly, like there's these regions where there's a bunch of white people that get beat up to equalize for the much more unreasonable just people going in and taking out black communities, something like that. But the statistics at the face value appear to not show that. So my concern is that I am overreacting as he overreacted. And so that's why, even though I say these things, like I troubles with digestion, trouble sleeping, that sort of thing. I hope I'm wrong and I'm overreacting and I've been ideologically possessed to a sense. But I'm trying, and maybe it's impossible to tell how to escape that and to take a step back. I think I should, even if I'm right, I think I should try to take a step back because, look, one of the leaders of the truckers, she got arrested and she was crying. And, I mean, fair enough, it's scary and whatnot. But being arrested is at this point, a very established practice. It isn't the end of the world.
Yeah.
People go to jail and come out of it all the time. That's the point.
Yeah.
So it's sort of the unknown, like you're not used to it, right? And it's a total change of your life. But you're not actually going to lose everything. Even in a totalitarian dictatorship. Even if you die fighting for what you believe in, you haven't lost everything because you're going to die at some point anyways.
Yeah.
So crazy anxiety. So what I think a lot of scary news is for, I think people are generally slightly anxious.
Yeah.
And scary news justifies your fear. And so that's why the news tries to be negative all the time. It's not because people like negative news. It's because they feel afraid and they don't want to blame it on themselves. So if the world is really scary, then they can blame their fear externally rather than trying to work on themselves. So I think this could be me finally finding an excuse to blame the world for my problems with what Trudeau's done. But what Trudeau has done is he has shut down peaceful protest.
Yeah.
And as Kennedy said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. That is my concern, that Trudeau is forcing the country towards
a
civil war or Chinese-like compliance.
Yeah.
Neither of which are good.
Yeah.
And wasn't he saying that you're not allowed to post stuff about the truckers on social media now?
I haven't seen that.
That was last night. It just came. It was really recent, but it was something like, we're going to crack down on online misinformation, so they're not letting reporters in anymore. They're doing what Australia did. And that the moment they don't let reporters in, that's obvious what they're doing is they don't want you to see what they're doing, and they want to keep you blind so that they can get away with anything. Yeah. And, okay, so there's people confused. There was people being arrested and then dropped off in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And people are like, oh, that's just them, putting the people in a dangerous situation. No, that's not what they're doing. Well, if you arrest someone and then drop them off just in the middle of nowhere, what you're actually doing is they have done nothing illegal, but you want to scare the crowd that sees them being arrested. That's the whole purpose of that exercise.
And also, you're leaving no paper trail if it turns out what you're doing is wrong.
Well, you have no cause to arrest them, so you don't. Instead, you just take them away to make it look like they're being arrested.
Yeah.
Because you can detain them for a couple hours.
Yeah.
And then that makes the crowd think, oh, they're dragging people away. I'm going to get out of here. It's a scare tactic. That's what it is. I'm not saying you shouldn't be scared or run away or something. It's just, it's all political maneuvering. Yeah. And it's kind of gross. Yeah. And the whole faceless stormtrooper vibe, that was kind of nasty. The running over people with horses. Yeah. Now, look, when I see Spain, right, and the Catalonians that were being all violent and the police went in there and cracked them down, I was like, oh yeah, wow, look at that police smooth unit. Very cool to watch. Doesn't mean it's good. And I did think they were being brutal to the people they beat on the ground before. But I didn't think it was the end of the world for Spain, right? No. But so I think the Catalonians might have thought that it was. Yeah. Now again, the thing that makes me see the difference personally is, so in the United States with Black Lives Matter, they did have a lot of protesters getting beat by the police. And in Canada, we've had that with environmental protests, First Nation protests.
FLQ.
That's different.
Okay.
FLQ totally detracts from my point, actually.
Okay. So I don't really know the level of them. We did 1 unit on them. So.
Yeah. So we've had these environmental protesters. Yeah. We've had these First Nation protesters. United States, the Black Lives Matter. Those got beaten by the police. That's really bad, right? Police get... I'm not actually opposed to the police cracking down on the protesters and arresting them when they're breaking the law. Yeah. So a lot of these truckers, they are breaking the law. They're, noise violation, blocking traffic, loitering, that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, I don't actually mind them being arrested. I wouldn't want them to be, but I don't. That's how the system's supposed to work. It's the invocation of the Emergency Act alone, which is my concern. Everything else I'm actually okay with. Yeah. But the United States didn't do that. Yeah. We didn't do that when they were blocking the pipeline in Canada. No. We didn't do that with Black Lives Matter. We didn't do that when they're burning the churches, when they're beheading the statues.
We didn't do that when the people put the logs across the road and were armed with axes and guns. Yeah. And there's over 200 people that the police actually shot at and were shot, and people died on both sides, and there's no emergency acts for that.
Yeah. So my concern is not the actions that are necessary to keep order, because you do need a certain degree of order. You cannot have a tyranny of protesters ruling the country. Yeah. The problem is that this is a blatant power grab, because there's no reason to invoke the Emergency Measures Act. And the ability to freeze bank accounts is insane.
They didn't, well, it's been pointed out.
Epstein didn't have it. They did. But here's the thing. I don't think Epstein should have his bank account frozen.
I don't either.
Because, again, it's far better to let a couple people like Epstein keep their bank account.
Yeah, that's why it's when I was talking to your dad about this, I was talking about this, well, you don't want terrorists to get funding. And I was like, no, arrest the terrorists, arrest the people doing that. But once you take this step too far...
Banks need to be neutral. The moment banks become moral entities, it's... Well, everyone withdraws their money. You have societal collapse.
Withdrawing their money.
You cannot have banks be moral entities. Yeah. That is... Banks need to be neutral. If banks aren't neutral, the whole system doesn't work.
People in the Canadian military are advising people to take their money out of Canadian banks.
There's a reason Switzerland supported the Nazis and the Allies.
Yeah.
It's because they knew you have to be neutral. And to be neutral isn't to only agree with one side.
Yeah.
To be a bank, you have to let the money come in, come out. You don't ask any questions.
Yeah.
Because if you ask questions, suddenly you are the arbiter of who gets to be a citizen in society.
Yeah.
And that is terrifying. That is absolutely terrifying that the government can choose who is a citizen and who's not. That is the social credit system in China.
Yeah.
And that is what the Emergency Measures Act has done. That is what scares me. It's not the crackdowns. Like the police in France. India had a really big protest recently, farmers' protest.
Yeah.
And they actually used a similar act to pass a bunch of laws under the people's noses, and that's what got them into protest in the first place. Yeah. So India actually might be a similar bad situation. But in France, they're not stupid enough to do that because Macron knows what happens when French leaders seize power.
Yeah.
And so, do we need to make an example in Canada like that? See, that sounds like a call for violence, and I do not. That is not Canadian.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, that might be Quebecan.
What we need, because we're Canadian, and because of the truckers, it ties together perfectly. Is we need to lock Trudeau in a cage with a Canadian goose for 5 minutes, and that's it. And then we let him free, and then all charges absolved. 5 minutes with a Canadian goose. Okay, so no, 2 minutes. Come on, we're out of animals. we're not. But no, this is.
And then he has to prove he can chug a bottle of maple syrup.
The unlawful. No, the unnecessary.
Yeah.
Use of the Emergency Measures Act. Plus, he didn't even talk to the protesters. If he had talked to them and said, we cannot come to a compromise, and then he had invoked it, he would have so much more legging to stand on.
Yeah.
He said, I tried. They wouldn't listen to reason. If he had even done that much, it'd be like, okay, I can kind of see his point of view. He doesn't know what else to do. No, he didn't even do that much. Went straight for the power because he wants power. And then he didn't just use that power to be like, all right, I am going to force the police to work hard. I'm going to force I'm going to force tow truck drivers to do this. We're going to get the city cleared. And then I'm going to give it my powers, bam, bam, boof. Instead, he went, okay, we're going to freeze bank accounts. We're going to send the CBC to take the anonymous names of random citizens and harass them and scare them into donating money. We are going to destroy people's lives because they donated to a cause they may or may not have even understood that was legal at the time they donated to it.
Yeah.
That is tyranny. And
also, when the War Act was called outside of a time of war was to deal with terrorists.
Yeah, so
by calling the Emergency Act to deal with people is calling them terrorists.
Yeah. So why I said the FLQ undermines my point.
Yeah.
Was they invoked the War Measures Act there.
Yeah.
And I was giving examples where they didn't.
Yeah.
Now what happened with the FLQ was they had killed several politicians, 2 I believe, and they had kidnapped others.
Yeah. And
so they didn't know where these people, like there was high up politicians currently kidnapped that they were desperate to find. There was FLQ assassinating other politicians running around Quebec. And so they were like, we need to do something. Now, I don't think Pierre Trudeau should have done it.
No.
I think he did the wrong thing. And there's a great interview where a reporter steps right in his face and just starts questioning him. Yeah. And Pierre Trudeau, to his credit, doesn't back down. And he answers him. And I don't think he does some fair stuff. He says to the reporter, what would you do? It's like, it's not my job.
Yeah.
Like the reporter should have just said that. But what the reporter does say, so he says, what would you do? There's terrorists. He's like, that's for the police to do. It's like, yeah, but we need to solve this. Like, people die all the time and you don't invoke this Measures Act. It's just politicians, so now you care. And, the reporter holds his ground.
Yeah.
But Trudeau also holds his ground. And it's this great, okay, I disagree with you. Mm-hmm. And, I really disagree with what Pierre Trudeau did.
Yeah, and well, also his opposition at the time really disagreed with him.
But, yeah, plus there was actually people with sense disagreeing with him. The press was disagreeing with him. Yeah. It wasn't like the press and the opposition are all on his side and it's all just a great big boys club that they go and meet Klaus Schwab and lick his boots and then go back to pretending they're opposition. Or coalition or whatever it might be. They were actually all on different sides trying to work for the best of what they thought was the best. Yeah. You could tell Pierre Trudeau was in a very difficult situation trying to do what he thought was best.
Yeah.
I think he did the wrong thing, but there was people dying. I can understand why he did it.
Also,
in this case, there is no need. When Trump sent in the National Guard, the police couldn't do anything. He was like, what do I do? Now, I think they handled it horribly in the States. There was police, unmarked vans, just popping out, grabbing people, putting them in vans. Like, that's horrible. That is awful. Absolutely should not have done that. He didn't use that to gain more power.
No.
He might have abused the power he currently had, but at least he didn't grab more power.
Yeah. Also, so one of the things...
Destroy the democratic process.
One of the things to note about the War Times Act...
Next vote is going to be 67% Trudeau.
When the War Times Act was called, people were actually in support of it. A lot of people. And then a guy really fought against it. And people realized how bad it was. And that's the case right now, is actually a lot of people are in favor of it getting called. And a lot are against it. And it's like,
Yeah. Well, here, maybe Meccan will help us here. Because I am so disappointed in Canadians right now, actually.
Yeah.
But the public, with its mob yearning to be instructed, edified and pulled by the nose, demands certainties. It must be told definitively and a bit raucously that this is true and that is false. But there are no certainties.
Yeah.
And so this is the best I can say to Canadian citizens who are just ignorant and blind to this. And Jordan Peterson very empathetically came up with this. It's easier to believe there is, let's say 10,000 right-wingers uprising in your country.
Yeah.
Than to believe every politician, all the media, and all the police are corrupt.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's true.
Mm-hmm.
It's so much easier to believe there's a fringe minority of extremists in your country than to believe that every single system is in cahoots and is corrupt.
Yeah.
But it appears that everything is corrupt. And when you look at the WF, they even say it outright.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not sure... I can't keep talking, but I'm not sure if the WF is the worst thing ever, because it reminds... Like, think of if everyone was a Mason,
Yeah.
how concerned would you be? Like, if every politician was a Mason?
A little.
I'd be a little concerned, yeah. But I wouldn't say it meant that they were all working together. It's like they're all in the same club. That doesn't mean they're all going to work together.
Now,
if every politician was part of the Illuminati, like, I'd be concerned. But I wouldn't... Actually, the thing is about the Masons.
Yeah.
They don't have a message for what you should do to society, whereas the Illuminati do.
Yeah.
So... And that's the problem. The WF says this is how society should be. The Masons don't say this is how society they should be. They say this is how an individual person should be. So I'm actually more concerned for the WF because they say how society should be, not how individuals should be.
Also, what is concerning is having the gall of your leader of the organization to say everyone's in this position.
Yeah.
And we are in control.
Yeah. As if, like, if he was just like, oh, I'm so proud of all my alumni. Like, imagine half the politicians were Harvard graduates.
Yeah.
And the head of Harvard was like, we've got graduates, 50% of cabinet members in Canada are Harvard graduates.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of our school. You'd be like, still slightly concerning.
Yeah.
But you'd be like, okay. But if the Harvard guy said, our Canadian contingent contains half of its members belong to us. It's like,
Also, here's our plan of how everyone's going to live.
So if everyone was a Mason, it's like, okay, they all have an idea of how people should be, but not how society should be run. If everyone was Illuminati or Rosencrantz, you'd be like, they actually want to change society.
Yeah.
The thing about Rosencrantz is, well, they're historically socially responsible. I mean, that's kind of their thing, is that they guide society, right?
Yeah.
The problem is, with the Rosencrantz, I think the Enlightenment was their fault, and I think it might have led to what we have right now. I think they might have not foreseen what they were doing.
Yeah.
Like, I think Francis Bacon might have caused scientism. And, so it could be all their fault. But, yeah, I'm mildly concerned. Well, very concerned. But I'm not sure if I should be or not.
Part of my stress is not knowing if I should be concerned or not.
And...
that is where it comes from, is the trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. And making the allowance for it, and knowing when you're right and wrong, and trying to cross-reference all experience and knowledge in your life to look at what's going on currently, and then make your judgments, and then do it over and over again.
Well, it just seems so blatantly, obviously evil, right?
Yeah.
But there's so many people that support it that it makes me wonder, like, am I the crazy one? Like, what's going on? I don't think Trudeau's going to hold on to the power forever. I think he's going to give it up after about a month. and everyone's going to be like, see, there's nothing to be concerned about. And then we'll never have a we'll never have a protest again.
Yeah,
a peaceful protest again. And then the government can just slowly tighten the screws and do whatever they want.
Freeze your accounts.
Like, I don't think Trudeau's going to be flat-out dictator. I hope he is flat-out dictator.
Yeah.
That'd be better, because then we could get rid of him. But I think what's going to happen is he's going to release it once he's got a couple economic sanctions in place that allow him to control Bitcoin and whatnot, and then he's going to be like, oh, yeah.
You know, what I was really hoping for is for Singh to have a backbone, say no, and then force an election.
They were going to vote last night.
Did they not vote? I thought they voted.
So from what I understand, the last night's vote was for continuing the Emergency Measures Act.
Yeah.
And they were also going to do the...
Because Singh said, regrettably, we've had to agree with the Liberals. That was what they said.
They were going to do the non-confidence vote last night, but I think they ran out of time, so they delayed it to next week.
No, they didn't run out of time. Actually, listen to this part. It said, their current service going started, and then someone said, we agreed that after we had the vote about war times act, we were going to dissolve Parliament for the time being and not continue.
Yeah, so they didn't vote on the non-confidence vote, I think, which is... It's like, oh, we worked an hour. Yeah. Oh, no. Well, time for a week-long break. I'd love to be a politician, jeez. Yeah. Sick bastards. Just... Yeah, it's concerning.
We shouldn't look at them like that, though. That's terrible.
Like what?
Sick bastards. We shouldn't have this opinion, politicians. We should look at politicians...
Well, whose fault is that? Yeah. It's theirs, isn't it?
I know. I'm just saying, like, we should like our politicians.
Well, like I said, I was watching videos of Jack Layton, and I thought, wow, if that dude was my neighbor, he'd be the best neighbor ever. He seemed like the coolest guy.
Yeah.
Even if he was a terrible leader, he seemed like a cool guy.
Yeah, it's because of him our dad ran for NDP.
He just seemed great. I actually listened to his political platform, and I really don't like it, actually. Yeah. Well, okay, I don't like it. It sounds impossible. He wanted to give money to everyone that needed it. I was like, how? But if anyone could make it work, it would be him. Yeah. Like he had some magic to him. And why is it that, Bill Gates got cancer, he got cancer. Like, why is it the magic people, they die? It's like they're burning the candle too hard or something. I don't know. Yeah. All right, I got to stop. Yeah. But I hope I'm wrong about Canada. And next episode comes from the Gulag.
Just one last silly thing. And this is my personal opinion on matters. I've been kind of hoping for the Queen to step in.
Me too.
And I know that people say the Queen has no power in Canada. But to me, she is the highest authority. I will listen to what the Queen says. Yeah. Like, if the Queen asks me to do something, she is the monarch.
Yeah. Oh, and for the podcast, I'm not censoring myself, even if it becomes the law. I'd rather be arrested now and go to jail now than... and show people... Because people know me, and the world can talk to me. Yeah. And if they arrest me now, there's more chance the world complains than if they arrest me 10 years from now. Yeah. So I'm not going to change what I talk about. Yeah. Even if that becomes illegal. Like it seems like it might be.
We have principles.
It's not just principle. It's really me looking out for myself. Like, it's better to be arrested now than 20 years from now when we have a gulag.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is Pirate Podcast that's still not listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this will be out in 4 weeks from now.
Yeah, so it'll be a whole new world then.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
you'll get to look back on our optimism as fondness.
Yeah. Our pessimism, hopefully.
Yes.
And it's sort of like, man, the acid mines are great. I don't know what we were worried about.